Hello everyone, let's see what's going on now. What is going on? Hello John Shear, yesterday is going well. As you will notice, I have put a link both in the chat and in the description for this to the vote on Patreon for November's patron choice. And I'll make this disappear. Sorry, there is a bit disorganised, but it's there. Hello, how are we doing? It's been one of those interesting days. Right then, let's see. Will there be books about about commanders in World War I Adriatic? Carl von Gasberg, you have a one-tracked mind. And I'm not sure, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Hi, Sean Mack. Hi, DGB40. Hi, Carl Hardman. Hi, Tim Sims. Hello to Nova Scotia. Dunner Garnhammer. Hello. Aviator Enterprise. Hello. Enjoyed latest build pumps. Was intrigued by the missing cosmonaut story. I have had so many different various stories, but that one is one which I has checked out as much as anyone can check it out. Carl, how's the weather across the pond? That's always an interesting question. Hi, Stav Thompson. Afternoon, ooh, looks quite fun going on here. Right, and Matthias Savick, hello. Welcome to to Bru Ships. I do too many of these. I need a break. I'm going to take one this week. I am going to take one this week. Hello, Jay Lingworth. Hello, Jerison. Hi, Dev Squad. Hi, Adam Crow. Hello. Hello, Richard. Hello, Blue Shirt Buddha. Hello, Matthew Lemelecki. How are we doing? Hello, Doug M. Hello, King's Rook. You're not that late. I'm running a couple of minutes late. I was having fun sorting out books and making sure I had the pile of books all nicely organised. So, the books all go in the pile in order. And this time we'll balance because I have been practicing. Today's books. And because I'm nice, I will turn them round so that they sort of face you guys, but they're going to be a bit back to front. I do apologise for that one. The sound is playing up a little. It shouldn't be. Let's see. Ooh. What is this function? Well, I'm not quite sure why it's doing that. It shouldn't technically be doing that. But let's see. Is that still better? Is that still peaking? Hopefully it shouldn't be, but I will turn it down a bit. It's amazing. Ooh. Hello, how's that? Is that better? Audio good here, Tim Sims. How do I play audio satisfying earplugs? Shomack, before we get started with the books, I was wondering if the RN had a system similar to the Centre for Ship Types, i.e. BB, CA, ETC, and was there a consensus of the RN for what the Scharnhorst were? To an extent, there were, and the RN's consensus on the Scharnhorst was battleships. Made it worse. Still peaking. Okay, let's take that down. How's that? That's still peaking? Or has that gone very, very quiet? How about this one? Is that better? Hello? I can hear some noises. Okay. Getting a lot of static white noise. I have no idea, but let me see whether I can sort that one out. So let's go to settings. Because the new system is a bit fun. Noise gate. So turn that one on. How's that doing? That's good. White noise is gone. Alright. Alright. Stephanie Wilson, much better. Thank you. And hello, Stephanie. New IKB 4472. White noise is gone. I'm glad. Bellona, hello, and no longer deafened. That I'm glad. I now can get Iron Brew out. If I'm not deafening people, I can get Iron Brew out. Alzaski, I can hear some noises. Well, that was a while back, so that's good. Allow for lag. Ah, yes, I always should allow for lag. I never do. I always forget it. I always forget the lag. Zerpscott, sometimes I think Drac and Dr. Clark swap each other's mic settings. That way, Drac is super quiet because his mic is set for Alex's lecturing voice, and Alex is super loud because his mic is set for Drac's voice. Seeing as I sometimes used to follow his instructions for how to set up the mic, that could be the case. Whenever you talk... Danragana, sound. You need to look at the latest comments on sound, not try to catch up after charging. Sound is good now, glad. Whenever you talk, it cuts out at the end. Oh. Well, perhaps I have set the noise gate too high. That might be it. I wasn't quite sure. When it developed the noise gate, I wasn't quite sure at what point. Let's see, noise gate. I'll stick it down there a bit, and hopefully that's better. Hi, Danny Freeman. Oh, I needed that. It's been a day. It has been a day and a half. So, two things. One, there are going to be some long patrols coming out this week where I've gone through and hopefully the sound works for them. I have checked them as much as I can, but one of them is 75 minutes long and one hasn't been finished recording yet. Hello, St. Kitts. Good evening, Dr. Clark. I've been joining your videos for several months and thought it was about time I said hello. Well, hello and thank you for watching the videos and glad you're enjoying them. And thank you for saying hello. Dirt Scott, what are the important question? What are the 32 flavors in Iron Brew? I've figured out about 16 of them, but I can read you the ingredients. Calm Gasman, not all mics are created equal. Yes, not all are by any chance. This one contains carbonated water, sugar, acid, citric acid, flavorings, including caffeine, ammonium ferric citrate and quinine, sweeteners, aspartame, acetylidate K, preservative E211, colours, sunset yellows, FCF, Bura, sunset yellow, and all sorts of other things. Comes with a warning, may have an adverse effect on activity and attention in children. Contains the source of phenylhynine. Yep. Basically, it makes children hyper. Judging by my family, it works very well on adults as well. Dan Freeman has got a very cool profile pic. I have to admit that. He has gone for a cool one. It is very, very nicely put together. I have to say, though, top 4 of the profile pics I can see, but I'm sorry, new IKB 4472, there's a great big stovepipe hat in it. It's just cool. It is just cool. And, you know, Stephanie Wilson also has a good one, and Jay Richardson's does look suitably cool as well. But, no. Can I see my favourite? No, I can't see my favourite at the moment yet, this evening. When it comes online, I'll tell you. Joe, no one around tried to give students some work and teach them spectral analysis on Iron Brew? We have. It's caused fun. Nick Waters, hello. Right then, so today's topic of discussion is leadership, and I know there's some news in the news about going around about Admiral Nelson, so I thought I'd deal with that one straight off the head. So, a long, long time ago, a man who spent a few months ashore in most of 20 years of service wrote a letter to a friend, apparently. In this letter, he apparently suggests support. He suggests support for slavery, which at the time was quite a common perception. Now, three things I would always point out when we're talking about this. 1, he's not a hero because of his politics. He's a hero because of his service to the British state and the battles he fought and won on the state's behalf. Using him as a template for a junior officer's career at the moment. Well, I think we've all been over in past that I'm far more of a fan of Collingwood for a junior officer's career at the moment than Nelson. Nelson's the break glass only if in World War status, then break glass and break it hard. But saying that, it is kind of interesting considering how the National Maritime Museum are looking at it now, when announcing it now. They already looked at it. They already looked into this and examined this and made some developments and evolutions in terms of their presentation of Nelson when they were looking at it at the centenary of Trafalgar, years ago. So they're looking at it again now. I would say, though, this when you're looking at letters in the past. Well, whilst Nelson was a bit of an inveterate letter writer, there are so many letters attributed to him, one does wonder how he managed to find time to command a fleet. 2, this letter comes out after he's dead, so he can't say whether it was written by him or not. Although presumably experts have verified it, but so far I haven't seen much of a discussion on that one. And 3, and this is the big one. He's writing a letter to a friend, not making a public statement. It's not meant for public consumption. We don't know what letter the friend had written to him to get that response. So we don't know what he's responding to. All we know is the section of a letter published by a supposed friend after Nelson had died to support the political position of the friend. It's to an extent the modern equivalent of someone standing up and saying, Elvis Presley would have wanted me to win the election. Or, and it's like that. It's basically going, there's this celebrity who once said this thing in a private communication with me, which I'm now making public. I'm not sure. Re-evaluating Nelson is up and against. So the people are going to get involved who are far more Nelsonic specialists than I am. But I'd also say take a look at his friend, because that doesn't seem much like a friend to me. Dirt Squad. I can imagine all the fun the lab techs must have cleaning iron brew out of the scientific machinery. Why do you think... Most of you might not know this, or if you have heard the build prompts, you'll heard us discussing it. I actually work with Draken Fennell's brother. We work at the same uni. And his brother is doing a PhD there, but is a technician there. So, yeah. He's the one who has to clean the iron brew out. Jerison, you can't compare the norms of 200 years ago to the morals of today. In 200 years' time, they'll probably look down on owning a pet. I hope not, because honestly, I think a big lot of the human life would be made a lot duller if we don't have dogs and cats. Although I'm more of a dog person. Surprise, surprise, considering the fluffy research assistant. Dirt Squad, there's a big difference of being seen as having unpleasant views in respect to modern day, as per Nelson, and having views thought to be unpleasant at the time, as per Churchill. Churchill occasionally wandered around. Calvin Gaspard, paraphrasing Drac about Nelson, he was the original Leroy, but survived enough to pick up knowledge when to rush in screaming. Still, I wonder what possible encounters he avoided and why, if any. A few. King's Rook, a newspaper with agenda taking a quote out of context. I know, who'd have thought? Jennifer, in case of war, break glass and quote, England expects every man will do this his duty, and then stand back. Yep. Just be very, very scared if what pokes through the window is me and Drac, with Drac in full body armor and me going, I'm just going to channel my inner Phillip Vian. Bernard, for example, I love Cicero, despite his many and glaring character flaws. Sometimes the backlash is because the person is so celebrated and people wish to make the mark and be different. Yep. Dan Fuhrman, Nelson's politics were not ideal by current standards, his treatment of prisoners in Naples, but he never claimed to be a politician and did marry someone from the West Indies. Yes, I think that was... Yeah, I'm not sure if that really stands in his favour or not sometimes. Because he then doesn't really stick with her. Night Air Productions, hello! Hi there everyone. We're talking about Elvis right now. However we got here, it's no doubt going to be interesting. Yeah, doing sense. Steph Thompson, Dr. Clark, not to use current examples, but this sounds like similar treadle that RGB was tied up with in passing of late. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if during the current election that Ruth Bader Ginsburg gets a lot of quotations of her, of private emails, of quotes she apparently said in passing at some point or other. Martin Dock, that's why people who drink iron brew don't spill this. I know it's more fatal to IT equipment than orange juice. Why do you think there is such a large gap between me and the camera, the mic, and the computer? The computer is now in this area here. I'm sort of hovering over the screen, having to do that. The iron brew is back here, or here. Afternoon, Jeff Beeler. Dunarkama. People have a hard time to accept people have both good and bad sides to them. One can admire certain aspects of someone and disagree with others. But people from different times make this worse. Pretty much. You can say someone's a hero because their attitude of service and the leadership they provided and the successes they achieved in the times that will happen when it was quite as desperate as it was. That can make them a hero. But other parts of their personality could, frankly, make them a shit. Especially in modern times. So, Nelson, the problem with Nelson is that no one could be the saint that the Victorians made of him. Definitely, Stephanie. This is half the trouble, I think. Some of history has been sanitized to such an extent that it's suddenly a revelation when you find out these people are human. It's like, I'm not going to use this book today, so I'm not going to put it in, but Pete Ellis. He is, frankly, a US Marine Corps hero. He's also, most of the time, drunk. Absolute. And not someone you really want to have a beer with because he will probably end up chucking the bottle of beer at you because he's an angry drunk. But he's still a very, very good US Marine Corps officer, even when he is pissed, actually, excuse the French. So, you know, history is complicated. The people are human. They have things that we don't like about them. Although, actually, I have to say the Nelson controversy is not the thing that's got me most worked up this week. Dev Scott, Nelson was definitely not a politician. Politicians knew, even at that point, never have public affairs with the wives of those higher up the social ladder. I'm not sure if an ambassador was higher up the social ladder than an admiral. I think they're about the same. Jabila, who do people say is the first great English admiral? Oh, Howard of Effingham. Jenna, I would personally, if I was advising someone to use an admiral from the past as a template for their career, I would suggest Hornby or ABC. That would have to be the certain ones I would go for. Hello, or Collingwood. Descott, do you think Nelson would have had the hero status if he hadn't died at Trafalgar but instead lived on? I think the fact that he died in his greatest victory did kind of help him on that one. I think he'd have still had hero status. Whether he'd have had sainthood status like he achieved in the Victorian period is an entirely different matter. Let's see. Yeah. The Victorians are responsible for many, many issues, but we'll get on to the first book today, maybe, at some point. Howard of Effingham, Jay. Nick Walters, drunk, maybe sweary, deeply flawed. Pick priorities. How did it go? People sleep easily because men are ready to do violence on their behalf. That is certainly the period that they were talking about. Dr. Dr. Before the books, what's going on? Why a rough week? Let's put it this way. I'm getting everything prepped so that next week I can go off and do the week I'm planning to next week, which is, broadly speaking, a research week. Broadly speaking, a research week. The research might be less documentary, more where can I find a nice comfy bed, but you know, it's going to include research. Descott, talking on the Victorian period, it's interesting to see a lot of the myth building creating of popular history in the United Kingdom, e.g. the Palace of Westminster Act. Yeah, the Victorian period created a lot of Britain as it's perceived. Sean Mack, Daniel Freeman, channel your ABC. What? Make Ike participate in a Catholic funeral for Darlan when he clearly wants to do anything else? Yes! Definitely. Just for the hell of it. And to wind up de Gaulle. Tim Sims, I wonder how Jutland would have gone with sturdy and commander battlecruisers. Well, Jellicoe would have been getting information for starters, so the battle might have happened earlier, at a slightly better angle, and more successfully. So, you can take your points from there. Hi, Nick Walters. Mm-hmm. Right then. So, this one's the first. And I know it's not naval history, it's not a leadership book. What is it? It's Terry Pratchett's Jingo. And why have I got Terry Pratchett included this week? Because the other controversy which has happened this week is, of course, I'm not even going to name it. A television program has come out based on The Watch. I'm not even going to... They have called it The Watch. But it's just... It's just not anyway. I'm sorry, but they have... I could live with some of the changes, but turning Sybil from being a mature lady of robust figure to a svelte lady who's going to be basically a ninja just seems wrong. I can live with pretty much... I can even... nicest way... The quality of the acting, of the actresses and actors involved. Hopefully they can pull off some of the stuff, although it does look more steampunk than Terry Pratchett's Discworld from the things, but... Also, they seem to have got rid of Colon and Nobbs, and brought in Angua as the corporal, and she trains Carrot now. Whereas it was Carrot who trained Angua. I have no idea why they rewrote that one, because that one seemed like, because it was one who was a fish out of water training someone who actually fitted in. Whereas now they've got someone fitting in training the fish out of water, presumably. Which seems kind of... Well, she always looks like she fits in. Mm-hmm. So, Terry Pratchett's Jingo. Now... Lord Veteranary nodded. He knew how it was. He knew how it was far more than Leonard of Quirm did, which was why there was one key to the door, and he had it. Not that a man was a prisoner, except by dull humdrum standards. He appeared rather grateful to be confined in this light, airy attic, with as much wood, paper, sticks of charcoal, and paint as he desired, and no rent or food bills to pay. In any case, you couldn't really imprison someone like Leonard of Quirm. The most you could do was lock up his body. The gods alone knew where his mind went. And although he had so much cleverness it leaked continually, he couldn't tell you which way the political wind was blowing, even if you fitted him with sails. Leonard's incredible brain sizzled away alarmingly, an overloaded chip pan on the stove of life. It was impossible to know what he would think of next, because he was constantly reprogrammed by the whole universe. The sight of a waterfall or a soaring bird would send him spinning down some new path of practical speculation that invariably ended in a heap of wire and springs and a cry of, "I think I know what I did wrong." He'd been a member of most of the craft guilds in the city, but had been thrown out for getting impossibly high marks in the exams, or in some cases correcting the questions. It was said that he'd accidentally blown up the Alchemist Guild using nothing more than a glass of water, a spoonful of acid, 2 lengths of wire, and a ping-pong ball. Any sensible ruler would have killed off Leonard, and Lord Veterani was extremely sensible and often wondered why he had not done so. He decided that it was because, imprisoned in the priceless, inquiring amber of Leonard's massive mind, underneath all that bright investigative genius, was a kind of wilful innocence that might in lesser men be called stupidity. It was the seat and soul of that force which, down the millennia, had caused mankind to stick its fingers in the electric light socket of the universe and play with the switch to see what happened, and then be very surprised when it did. It was, in short, something useful, and if the patrician was anything, he was the political equivalent of the old lady who saves bits of string because you never know when they might come in handy. After all, you couldn't plan for every eventuality, because that would involve knowing what was going to happen, and if you knew what was going to happen, you could probably see to it that it didn't, or at least happened to someone else. So the patrician never planned. Plans often got in the way. And finally, he kept Leonard around because the man was easy to talk to. He never understood what Lord Veterani was talking about. He had a worldview about as complex as that of a concussed duckling, and above all never really paid attention. This made him an excellent confidant. After all, when you seek advice from someone, it's certainly not because you want them to give it. You just want them to be there while you talk to yourself. Now, that is political leadership sitting there. I think actually a lot of modern political leaders could do with reading Terry Pratchett. I mean actually reading Terry Pratchett properly. And going, you know what? So the problem is we have a plan. Because how often do politicians announce they have a grandiose plan, or officers, or anyone announce, a leader in a leadership position, announces they have a massive plan, and then it doesn't work? Because if you have a plan, the other commander will have a plan, and problems will ensue. Plans aren't necessarily good. And one interesting thing is that the Royal Navy, for many, many years, avoided having plans. The Royal Navy avoided them like the plague. Why? Because if you have plans written down, then someone can nick them. Whereas if you've got discussed ideas of what your objectives are likely to be, what forces you're likely to have, then you can develop a plan as the scenario takes place. Dev Squad, Patreon campaign for Alex to do audio book readings of Pratchett. That'd be tempting. Let's see. John South, I did Jingo for my A-level English. That was cool. That would have been cool. Calvin Council, lol, a Discworld book which avoided me. You haven't read Jingo. It's one of the coolest ones. It's got a General Tacitus in it. Jerushin, this is some confusing gibberish about training a carrot and fish to fit and a ship names. Don't worry, civil. And that's all to do with Terry Pratchett's Discworld. If you haven't read them, Jerushin, you should do. You'll end up laughing. If you can imagine a philosopher's soul deciding that, frankly, he didn't care about philosophy, did want to make people laugh, that's Terry Pratchett and his books, and they're very cool. Death Squad. There's also DS9 coming up here. It's one of the few Star Trek series that has realistic portrayals of all characters, rather than having captains who will always make the perfect decision. Oh, that's another reason to like Terry Pratchett, because Terry Pratchett, they don't make the right decision always. They make the decision they can do at the time and the information they have available. Oh, Richard, Eisenhower said plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. I would agree. Planning teaches you how to think about it and how to approach and analyze problems. The problems which actually come up are completely different. Jailermouth, you are assuming that politicians can read and make sensible decisions thereafter. Yeah. Dan Freeman, General Tacitus, and the generals who march their troops in actual arrow formations because that's what the books show. That would actually never surprise me. Close side. For those in chat who haven't had the pleasure of reading his work, read anything that Pratchett wrote. There are going to be 2 Pratchett books to discuss in this point. Well, in my high school year, medium time for me to read Discworld books was one a day. Cool. Hello, Brock Payne. That's good. We need fewer politicians and more statesmen. The trouble is, you need to be a politician first often before you become a statesman. Dan Freeman, we need fewer politicians and more Pratchett fans. That might be better. Rapid Razor, what about a book about how not to lead? Anything by George McClellan comes to mind. I'm going to not go anywhere near there because, frankly, I would agree. Nobody's taking the bait of Haig, Shulmac. No, we're all not touching that with a barge pole. Now, best book on naval leadership. I have got that last on today's book list. Jeff, also we must remember that assumption is the mother of all. Stephen Wilson, I am sure we have more Pratchett fans. We can always hope. Brock Payne, one of the best books on leadership that I personally read is It's Your Ship by a US Navy captain, commanded a Burt-class DDG. Pretty decent management book. Cool. How'd you decision? Prefer Sherry for space combat. Her ideas seem to ring a bit more realistically. Carlos replans. In Clancy's Red Storm, the Smet sent off is getting hit by an elderly German after getting the orders for assault is priceless. And kind of realistic. These things do happen. So, next book. A Bridge Too Far by Cornelius Ryan. One of the... Well, at least in my circles, it seems to be one of the lesser known books on this topic. And I'm never quite sure why, but I think possibly because it doesn't seem to be that commonly read outside of Canada. So if you're Canadian and you've heard of the book, that's great. It does seem to be quite successful out there. If you're in the UK, though, and you don't know about this book, that doesn't really surprise me. Now, why have I got in here as a leadership example? Well, it's because of page 285. At the precise time that Lieutenant Colonel John Frost secured the northern end of the Arnhem Bridge, a cautious approach to another prime objective, 11 miles away, was only just beginning. The 5-span highway bridge over the Wyle River at Nimgen in the 82nd Airborne Central Sector of the corridor was the last crossing over which the tanks of General Horrocks' 30 Corps would pass on their drive to Arnhem. With spectacular success, Brigadier General James M. Gavin's 504th paratroopers had grabbed the crucial Grave Bridge, 8 miles south of Nimgen, and at about 7:30 p.m., units of the 504th and 505th Regiment secured a crossing over the Maswal Canal in the village of Human, less than 5 miles due east of Grave. Gavin's hope of capturing all 3 canal crossings and a railroad bridge was in vain. The bridges were blown or severely damaged by the Germans before the 82nd could grab them. Yet, within 6 hours of landing, Gavin's troops had forged a route over which the British ground forces could travel. Additionally, patrols of the 505th Regiment, probing the area between the 82nd's drop zones near the Grobesesch Heights and the Reichswald, encountered only light resistance, and by nightfall, other troopers of the 508th Regiment had secured a 3.5-mile stretch of woods along the Holland-German border north of the Groesbeck drop zone and running to the southeast outskirts of Nimgen. Now, with 3 of the 82nd's 4 key objectives in hand, everything depended upon the capture of the 1,960-foot-long road bridge at Nimgen. Although General Browning had directed Gavin not to go for the Nimgen crossing until the high ground around Groesbeck was secured, Gavin was confident that all the 82nd's objectives could be taken on this first day. Evaluating the situation some 24 hours before the jump, Gavin had called in the 508's commander, Colonel Roy E. Linguist, and directed him to send 1 battalion racing for the bridge. In the surprise and confusion of the airborne landings, Gavin reasoned the gamble was well worth taking. I cautioned Linguist about the dangers of getting caught in streets, Gavin remembers, and pointed out that the way to the bridge was to approach from the east of the city without going through built-up areas. Whether by misunderstanding or a desire to clean up his initial assignments, Linguist's own recollection was that he was not to commit his troopers in an assault on the bridge until the regiment's other objectives had been achieved. To the 1st Battalion, commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Shields Warren, Jr., Linguist assigned a task of holding protective positions along the Groesbeck Highway, about 1.25 miles southeast of the city. Warren was to defend the area and link up with the regiment's remaining 2 battalions to the west and east. Only when these missions were accomplished, Warren recalled, was he to prepare to go to Nimgen. Thus, instead of driving for the bridge from the flat farming areas to the east, Warren's battalion found itself squarely in the centre of those very built-up areas Gavin had sought to avoid. It was nightfall before Warren achieved his other objectives. Now, with precious time lost, lead companies began to move slowly through the quiet, almost deserted streets of Nimgen. The main objective was to reach the traffic circle leading to the southern approach to the bridge. There was a diversionary target as well. The Dutch Underground reported that the detonating mechanism for destroying the Great Crossing was situated in the main post office building. This vital information reached Warren's units only after they had begun moving towards the bridge. The platoon was hurriedly sent to the post office where, after subduing the German guards, engineers cut wires and blew up what they believed to be the detonating controls. Whether this apparatus was, in fact, actually hooked up to explosives on the bridge, no one would ever know for certain, but now at least electrical circuits and switchboards were destroyed. When the platoon attempted to withdraw to rejoin the main force, they found the enemy had closed in behind them. They were cut off, and for the next 3 days would be forced to hold up out in the post office until help arrived. Meanwhile, as the remainder of Warren's force approached the park that led towards the bridge, they came suddenly under intense machine gun fire and armoured car fire. Captain Henry de Beschbure, the Dutch officer assigned to the 82nd, remembers that guns suddenly opened up on us, and I could see the flashes of fire from the muzzles. They seemed to be all around us. Before he could raise his carbine to fire, Vespergy was hit in the left hand and elbow and the right index finger. To Corporal James R. Blue, the eerie battle raging in the blacked-out streets was like a nightmare. Right away we were engaged in hand-to-hand combat, Blue remembers. He was moving through the streets with Private First Class Ray Johnson, both armed with M1 rifles with fixed bayonets, when I came face to face with SS troops. As Johnson tried to get some of the Germans with his bayonet, Blue went after an officer with a trench knife. Our orders were not to fire. If we came to close combat we were to use knives and bayonets, but Blue recalls the trench knife seemed mighty short, so I used my Tommy gun. That closed that chapter, but almost immediately a self-propelled gun began to fire in our direction. We moved up to the park and tied in with other platoons. It's a cool book, but it is a good example, this operation, A Bridge Too Far, of leadership gone awry, of people not talking to their subordinates, not listening to their seniors, not setting out clear objectives. Keep changing it. Nimation. Thank you, Dan Freeman. Okay. Jeff Beeler, Canadian who's heard of the book and seen the movie. I'm glad. Jeff Beeler on Boy Browning on how not to lead in battle. Yeah. Alright. Rapid Razor. Band of Bravos leadership book? Dan Winter's book. Yeah. Dick Winters, I mean. Yeah. Book. Richard Winters. His book is a good one. Old Richard, Dr. Clark, for a good laugh, read some of Admiral Dan Gallery, captain of UFO Files, Captain Fatso series. Staple of wardroom bookshelves for cool. Of many of my ships. Dan Freeman, I think picking the Guards Armor Division to lead 30 Corps advance was a mistake. As someone can't remember, he said it was the one time you needed a fearless cavalry charge. Well, they're the Guards. They're fearless. But yeah, if you could have had something like the Desert Rats up there, that probably would have worked a little bit quicker. Nantrium, Market Gun is basically a textbook on how not to plan and conduct operation for anyone with a more sophisticated military in Italy of World War II. Actually, the plan was good. Execution was the problem. The plan was lovely. The execution was the fact that the plan, unfortunately, forgot that it was dealing with humans. And could have probably done with some concerted amphibious assaults going on the coast as well, to divide the enemy responses. But it's a good one. Alistair Crow, good morning. Jim Chisholm, thank you. It's very kind of you. Super chats are always appreciated. They go to the Iron Brew Fund. Well, and the Book Fund. And the currently also the Buying Wood for Bookshelf Fund when new office arrives. Because the wood is going to have to be pretty heavy duty to take my books. And I may need to replace floorboards in my bedroom after this, after all the books have moved out, because I think they've probably been a bit bent by the weight of books. Dirt Squad, Daniel Freeman, it didn't help that the Colonel of the 82nd didn't take the bridge that he was meant to, instead took some hills nearby, as we've just been over there, Linguist. Plebiscite. I think the operation had just been to get grapefruit to Nimgen, then it would have been conducted sort of successful. The problem is the third bridge. Yep. Rosowski, it would be cool if you had some oak from old sailing ships. I think that's out my price range. I'm currently going for marine ply. That's in my price range and going to be thin enough that I don't lose too much space to shelving. That's the crowd. Would like to report I have brought copies of Lynchpin of Victory and the Americans in War Trilogy you recommended. Did not tell my beloved wife about the price tag. Good man! Oh, that's going to get me in trouble with so many wives. Rapparosa, I can't recall that they know they were dropping into the middle of two band divisions. No, they didn't, and they actually didn't. The Panzer divisions weren't full-strength Panzer divisions. They'd been mauled earlier in the campaign and were being rebuilt. The thing is, I often think with Operation Market Garden, it's a classic say of trying something very daring and not yet going daring enough. Because if they combined it with even a divisional strength amphibious landing up the Dutch coast, so that you've got the armoured corps going up this way, paratroopers coming in, and a division or so being landed and coming across from the coast, the Germans would have been... Because that's at that point, where do you send your division? Do you deal with the amphibious brigade for attack assault coming in? Do you deal with the paratroopers? Do you deal with 30 Corps? Either way, you've got problems. I think the trouble is by making it down one avenue of advance, they end up making the job almost easier for the Germans. Samsung can look into shipping costs as I have access to 2x8 46 Pacific Redwood planks from work. Might be able to send you a bundle. Waiting on the new shirt. Thank you. And it could be quite cool. Still, Navarrete, still light infantry versus tanks. Yes. And the whole thing was supposed to depend on air support to deal with it. Decision. Oh, good. A book that intentionally shows leadership to avoid. The Rising Sun by John Toland. Definitely. It's also a bit of a book to avoid. Yeah, there are options, even after Anzio. Now, frankly, if you thought Nelson was a high-risk, controversial topic, the next one's going to be even more and more controversial than that by a long way. Now, I'm not sure if the 4 random books with this in has come out yet. It may or may not have. If it hasn't, I apologise. If it has, you'll enjoy it. This is Antonia Fraser's book. Cromwell. Now, what I find interesting is the amount of times when we are talking about great politicians, great generals, great strategists around the world, Cromwell doesn't come up. Cromwell's forgotten, and there's a reason he's forgotten. Because the British like to forget him and no one else wants to talk about him. The reason the British like to forget him is because he kind of does some nasty stuff in Ireland. Really nasty stuff in Ireland. And of course he successfully gets rid of Charlie Boy number 1, which isn't really much of a trouble, because Charlie Boy number 1, let's be honest, is a bit of a Twinkie. Yeah, I'm going to call him a chocolate bar. Looks all hard, but that melts quite quickly. It's a good one. Cromwell is good. He achieves what is half the reason, in fact, a large part of the reason that you have the Reformation, that you have Charles II called back to the UK, is because Richard Cromwell, his son, isn't able to stand up and take on the job which Oliver left. There is no one else who really is capable of uniting the country. So your only options are Charles II. He's the only one who comes closest to Oliver. And hence it's a very interesting, you start to get the beginnings of what I would call the modern British Constitution. Because actually, in many ways, the modern British Constitution owes its roots not to Magna Carta or anything like that. No. It owes itself to the Protectorate, the government and the organisation as it was set up then, which is then turned into a monarchy. Okay? So it's a republic which is turned into a monocracy of forms, i.e. a democracy-monarchy hybrid, where democracy is slowly gaining competence and powers from quite a strong base already, versus with a monarchy which is there to provide the stability and, to an extent, the long-term planning. Dirt Squad, you don't even need to do landings. You just need to tell the Germans via Garbo Act that there are going to be landings. Yeah, to an extent. Doing the actual landings will be quite fun, though. This is an idea for alt history map. Antwerp, Dibri, is Herfrika. Utrecht, operation to cut forces in Delta. Jebila. The Scheldt was after Market Garden in increasingly bad weather, mainly a Canadian fight. Yep. Martindock should have cleared the Scheldt estuary there by allowing Antwerp to be opened up for supplies before Market Garden. Yeah, but they were rushing Market Garden because they wanted to get there before they wanted to get to Berlin before the Soviets. Now, Freeman, just worrying about the supply of amphibious lift for adding it to Market Garden. There's a lot of it still going around. There is a lot of it still going around. That's the thing. The amphibious ships are not automatically all transferred across the world to go to Japan at this point. There are still quite a lot of them providing supplies moving backwards and forward. And once you've built enough supplies already in France, you can afford to take a few off and use them for other operations. Jerishon, the Roundhead atrocities were vengeance for Irish uprisings, which did similar things to Protestants in Ireland. Yeah. But, you know, two wrongs don't make a right. Jevila, Charles I was the antithesis of Charles II, anti-pragmatic versus ultimate pragmatist. Yes. And we have been over with Charles II the fact that he was supplying ships, sponsoring ships to go and fight for the Ottomans against the Venetians, whilst also at the same time promising his wife that he would find a way to support the Venetians against the Ottomans. Stab Thompson, haven't heard him called a Twinkie before. An aerobar? Looks good but full of holes, to be kind. Yeah, that's being a bit cruel. Charles I was supposed to be the spare rather than the heir, wasn't he? Well, so was Henry VIII, and Henry VIII did quite a good job. Stephanie Wilson, Magna Carta was never important until the Victorian claimed it was. Welcome to history. Tim Sims, Sir Alex Guinness and Richard Harris were brilliant in the film. We watched it in school in 1979. Cool. The English and Ireland is the longest sordid history. Less of the English. Yes, the English turning up were not good, but quite a lot of stuff was done by Scottish troops as well. And then there's Irish troops on Irish. It gets blamed on the English quite a lot, but yeah. It's by and a far long way not always the English. Jeff Hiller, who did Oliver Cromwell designate as his heir and why? He designated Richard Cromwell as his heir, his son. And he designated him as his heir mainly because he was told he needed an heir, and it needed someone who needed to get the support to sort of try for the army to organise around. That's good. It helped that Charles II was more interested in theatre than running the country, so it left the aristocracy, which made left it to the aristocracy, and they didn't overthrow him. That was certainly the perception he liked to give off. Now, the thing is, in the pre-television age, cinema age, the only options for entertainment are the theatre. B, if you want to conduct quiet meetings with people and do engage in what Tony Blair often called sofa politics, with quiet discussions with people, where best than a theatre where everyone's going to be anyway? You can have a bump in with your opponents, with your allies, and no one knows. It's not special. It's not them being invited to court or them coming to the palace. Don't think of the theatre. Just because someone goes to the theatre a lot in the time of Charles II does not mean they're going to the theatre for entertainment. There are lots of other reasons that they'll be in the theatre. Even when you're talking about his affairs with mistresses and meeting them, again, mistresses' houses are quite a good place to have arranged meetings with other people. Often their houses are not too far from the houses of those other people's mistresses. They might even share gardens. It allows for discussions to take place discreetly. The concept of needing a quiet, off-the-grid place to have a conversation in politics is not something that the modern world has developed. It has been around a long, long time. Julius Caesar used to engage in it a lot. It happens. Then from the English Civil War, the War of the Three Kingdoms was not exactly a democracy in the modern sense, more in the Athenian sense. Only get a vote if wealthy enough, male and not foreign. It works for that period. And frankly, it's better than no democracy. It's a start. This is the thing. We're talking several hundred years ago. It's a start. Death Squad, I should be more clear. By theatre, I mean actresses. And I did explain why. Saf Thompson, Theatre Den is the golf course clutch club today. Pretty much. Wine bar, insert, all those organisations, all those things. Think about it. In that period, do you have many golf courses? You can go hunting. But hunting is quite a dangerous activity. And if you're king, there are lots of kings who have died hunting. Yes, you might want to go and do it when you want to prove your athleticism, but going regularly. And also, have you tried to have a decent conversation with someone while on horseback galloping? You can't. So you're going to stop your horses, which becomes visible to everyone else in your hunting party. Whereas, if you want to have a quiet conversation between two people, just discussing things, just hypotheticals, in a nice noisy place where everyone is distracted, where anyone, if they're not staring ahead at the stage, is going to be creating a scene, where you can have curtains which go round your box because you're entertaining your mistresses again. Phillip, what would have happened with General George Monk? Well, he would have still been a general if it hadn't been for what he did next. Let's see. As preparations for the expedition proceeded, a debate in the Army Council provided further proof of Oliver's own inspirational zeal for it all. Lambert put forward a number of arguments against the design, including the telling suggestion that affairs at home, such as the much needed legal reforms, or for that matter affairs in Ireland, should be settled first. To this, Oliver replied by affirming the exact contrary. God had brought them to their present position, he said, to consider the work we may do in the world as well as at home. He added rather magnificently, an argument which does not as well as any other to defend his right to an expensive foreign policy, to stay away from attempting until you have the superfluity is to put it off forever. Our expenses being such as will, in probability, never admit that. Many contemporaries bore witness to the sincerity of Oliver's zeal for it all. His physician, Dr. Bate, from a hostile point of view, wrote later of his boastful enthusiasm. They also, interestingly enough, agreed in designating as one of the prime animators of this enthusiasm a former Dominican priest named Thomas Gage. On his influence, Whitlock, Ludlow, and a later Burnet all gave testimony, Ludlow calling him a principal adviser of this undertaking. Once again, the presence of Gage points to the strong element of a religious crusade which existed in the expedition, since Gage was one of the most voracious category of propagandists, the renegade who attacks the faith he has deserted with the benefit of much inside information with which to back his cause. A member of an old English Catholic family, one of those members had been implicated in the Babington plot, and with 3 brothers as priests, Gage had spent some years as a Dominican in the West Indies and Central America. Here he had had ample opportunity of observing first-hand the behaviour of Spanish missionaries. Some time before 1640, however, when he returned to England for good, he had apostatized. He also subsequently married. It was as a Protestant, then, that in 1648 Gage published his famous book, The English American, a new survey of the West Indies, which became a bestseller and impressed Cromwell sufficiently to have him cause a new edition to be brought out in 1653. Gage's mission was simple. It was to strengthen the perusers of the small volume against popish superstition, whether in England or in parts of Europe, Asia, or America. With this aim in view, he further described himself as a Joseph appointed by God to discover the treasures of Egypt. Only in this case, the treasures were the iniquities of the Spanish friars in New Spain and Central Mexico. There was also stock of objects of Protestant attack as the issue of indulgences from the Pope, wherewith we begin to blind that simple people with ignorant erroneous of popish principles. The corruption and wealth of the Mexican priests were generally indicated, the Franciscans being described as wretched imps, not only for ignoring their vows of poverty, but for wearing such unsuitable pieces of finery as orange silk stockings and lace-trimmed drawers, while they diced game generally and swore oaths. As for the Franciscan boast to have taught the local children to dance to the guitar of the Spanish fashion, capering with their castanets or knockers on their fingers, surely the friars would have been better employed singing in the choir. Vivid journalist as he might have been an ardent campaigner for his newly acquired Protestant cause, Thomas Gage was unfortunately also guilty of seriously misleading the Protector in his analysis of the Spanish situation in West Indies and Central America. For it was Gage to whom Cromwell applied in 1654 for a report on the conditions there. It was Gage who assured Cromwell that the Spaniards were weak enough as to collapse with the minimum assault. Gage believed that once Hispaniola and Cuba were taken, for which he did not anticipate much difficulty, the conquest of the whole of Central America would follow within 2 years. Cromwell's other adviser, on whom he relied for local analysis, was a lawyer from Barbados, Thomas Modiford. With much great appreciation of difficulties involved, Modiford advocated the capture of Trinidad, lying so close to the coast of coastal Central America, and then moving on to the mouth of Orinoco. Because Trinidad lay to the windward of the other Spanish territory, Modiford calculated that it would be needed an expedition from Europe on the part of Spaniards to recapture it. But this, on the face of it, sensible plan was ignored. In fact, the Council of State, in its instructions to commanders, left the precise location of first attack undecided. Not only Hispaniola, the island today occupied jointly by Haiti and Dominican Republic, but Cuba, Puerto Rico, and the Spanish Main were named as possible areas of attack. It was the general aim which was underlined, to gain an interest in that part of the West Indies belonging to the Spaniard. It's fun times. It's a good book. Shapiro, what was Charles II's influence on the armed forces? He was quite interested in making sure that they were ready, capable, and appointed. Jerison, 2 French kings killed themselves by hitting their heads on beams. It happens. A suspicious number of kings have died hunting. I wonder why. Well, the trouble is, trying to have that private conversation while going hunting does leave you rather exposed. Javila, I thought William the Marshal sorted things out for Henry III, who would rather build churches than create heraldry. His son was also Henry III was also rather quite successful at these things. Good bad books on leadership. Machiavelli's commentary on the history of Rome and The Prince. The Cole Notes version of the formwork. His ideas are treated as a meme rather than engaged with. That's often the problem with most of these things from history. They are not engaged with on a full level. Calvin Gasberg, re-hunting assets. Actually, hunting, especially for big game, deers, bears, wolves, was and is perceived as manly and necessary to lead a bunch of career soldiers, nobles. Yep. Daniel Freeman, someone gave the big game a vote and natural weapons. I think in the case of William of Orange, it was actually a mole, which caused his horse to stumble and throw him. So it's not always necessarily the big game which get the vote. Hmm. Constitution. The Prince was not the book he wanted to read, though. People to read, though. That was his commentary. The Prince was recycling of those ideas to get himself re-employed by a new patron. Yes, he also wrote a book on war, which is fairly good as well. Hmm. Institution, Schormack, his letters while on diplomatic missions, on the other hand, are some of the most ridiculous, unprofessional, and stuff ever submitted to a superior. Oh, Juicy Susan. Seriously. Don't go there. You should see some of the letters from ambassadors I have read from the 1920s and 30s. No, compared to them, Machiavelli is professional. Machiavelli is erudite, is minimalist. Seriously, there was one which was 12 pages of gossip. And when I say gossip, not even high quality gossip, I'm just talking, oh, and apparently this guy likes, this guy has got a new yellow tie from his wife, and he really likes it. And you're sort of going, and this is the Undersecretary for what? The Undersecretary for Agriculture. You're supposed to be doing the foreign policy brief. I'm not sure if the Undersecretary for Agriculture has a foreign policy section. I'm damn sure I don't need to know about it. The tie he just got given as a present. This decision, again, still not the worst. Robert 79. Robert Baratheon also died hunting. Another example from history. Robert Baratheon was Game of Thrones. That's not quite history, but I will accept it because it's it is history now. Although Season 7 was a major disappointment, and from a battlefield and strategy to this perspective, they seem to have lost all ideas of how to carry out combat. And also, here's the thing. The dragons went from being super weapons to being useless to being super weapons again. It just doesn't make sense half the time. Dev Squad. Sounds like the Diplomat Superiors have asked for everything, so that the Diplomat gives them everything. In excruciating detail, the Superiors very quickly learn to let him edit again. Hopefully. Hopefully. Read gossip about ties. Who knows? The Secretary might end up as Prime Minister, President in 20 years. Same with saving someone's Twitter and face history. Possibly in 20 years' time, but in this case, the Undersecretary for Agriculture was already 65 years old. The odds of him being around and in leadership position in that particular country in another 20 years was very, very low. Derek Arnhammer, the Angry Staff Officer has some fun articles on dragons and Game of Thrones battles. I know, I've read them, I love them. Decision. I can say that people will be surprised at how boring major leaders are behind closed doors. Although Christine Lagarde is emphatically badass in person. Dragons making sense. Looks around. Wait, what did I miss? In Game of Thrones world, they make sense. It's kind of like dragons in Terry Pratchett's world. They make sense in that scenario because it's a fictional world and it's where they live. Oh, 1 21 00. Save. So, next one. One you guys will probably have seen before because I keep pushing it, but I keep pushing it because it doesn't get enough said about it, so I'm going to keep pushing it. Over the Battlefield, Operation Epsom by Ian Danglish. Now, Operation Epsom is actually really, really cool, but it's one of those operations which is not that well known at all. This is the introduction. Some battles are easy to describe, others difficult, a few impossible. So wrote a historian of the Normandy campaign who placed Operation Epsom squarely in the last category. Alexander McKee went on to depict the battle as impossible to describe in any connected narrative. Perhaps this is one reason why Epsom has been neglected by history, passed over as yet another of Montgomery's attempts to take the city of Cannes. Yet this book is more than a response to the gauntlet thrown down by McKee. This author believes that Epsom has importance and interest on several levels. Strategically, this was the battle during which the German army in Normandy lost the strategic initiative. As a tactical study, this Normandy battle is almost unique in offering glimpses of the contestants' key formations in both attacks and defence, since the roles became reversed halfway through. The study was originally inspired by the Second Argyll and Sunderland Islanders' defence of a little French village in the Odon Valley, where the story of Operation Epsom simply a matter of ground taken and lost. The Argyll's isolated action might seem almost an irrelevance to the big picture. However, since one of the key themes of this book is the way in which inexperienced British troops stood up against some of Germany's best, the example of Gavris becomes important and very much relevant. The author is pleased to recount the story in unprecedented detail with a chapter to itself. It is a tale worth telling. The author hopes that the use of maps, diagrams, and a group of key events into the discrete passages will bring to life the story of a complex battle. Whether or not the result succeeds as a connected narrative, you the reader, may judge. This is by Ian Danglish in 2007. Now, why didn't I read the book to you? Why did I read the introduction? And why when we're talking about leadership? Well, leadership is often created by our image of leadership, i.e., people when they're in leadership positions will often think, what would a leader do? What does a leader in my mind do? That's how I react. Me, when I'm in charge, I never make people cups of tea. I just don't do it. Why? Because I'm in quite a lot of the roles where I work, I am the youngest person in the room. Or one of the younger ones. And in the nicest way, when you're the youngest guy in the room, and you're supposed to be in charge, but you make the tea for everyone, you can end up getting called the tea boy. So I don't do it. It's not me being rude. I make sure there are biscuits, I make sure there are tea, there is stuff for people, but I don't do it. At home, I might make tea for the family, but at work I don't. When we are talking about history, when we are talking about people, most professional military officers, naval officers, and quite a lot of politicians I know are history buffs, to a lesser or greater extent. And they model themselves on the people from history that they see most of what they want to be in. So the writing of history, in a way, is also a shaping of leadership. This book is cool for that. Aaron. Mm-hmm. King's Rook, Operation Epsom. Someone will be salty about that. I think they're more planning to go to the races. Drew's decision. I can't comment on that. I can comment that after that the other leaders generally are extremely deferential to her. Also, she's a generally nice person, whilst also being quite wealthy. Yeah. I know poor people who are lovely, rich people who are lovely. I know poor people who are frankly snobs, and rich people who are snobs. Believe it or not, there can be inverse snobbery. It's always fun when you bump into someone and they go, they find out about tales and go, oh no, I don't want to talk to an academic. I want to talk to someone who actually knows what they're doing who actually knows what they're doing. Just doesn't just talk about it. It's quite interesting when they found out very quickly I was also the person who they needed to talk to about talking about it. Couldn't seem to understand the concept that a course director could also be an academic doctor. I said a course director of a revision centre which is teaching A-level and GCSE education, being an academic wouldn't be that surprising, but apparently, them it was. John South, I always say no group has a monopoly on being ARSE holes. Yeah. Felix B, hello. I remember my stint as an NCO in the Swiss Air Force, Bloodhound Sound. The old guys were the easiest to lead as long as you worked with them. You in 6177. Sorry, mate. Settled down now with my Abdullah 12-year-old. Ooh, nice. Kingsrook and Sean Mack are now having a nice discussion over Andromeda Ascendant and watching. Andromeda Ascendant is actually one of my favourite of the programs, mainly because I like the Andromeda. She makes sense as a starship to me. Then from Re-Op Epsom, the British had learned that the best way to fight the Germans was in limited attack, then dig in and wipe out the inevitable counterattack. Yeah. Calm Gasmode, reverse snobism, yeah, after 40 years of communism, it's still too strong here. It comes strong everywhere. It does come strong. It's, it's annoying. Right then. Then I like the idea of Andromeda having a nice AI to interact with. That was a good one. Plus, one capable of sarcasm. Which is my view of when we know AI has, they have all these tests for what will actually be a functioning AI. It will be a functioning AI when it can achieve sarcasm. Right then. Juno 191. Not much. We've still got 2, 4, 6, 8 books to go. Hello, and hello, Juno. So, Thompson, Dr. Clark. I hope the chat is being nice to Romy. The Andromeda is a wonderful ship and good show. Kevin Sorbo has a new movie coming out soon as well. Ooh, that could be cool. Also, roughly 9 minutes. Also, Dr. Clark reading Terry Pratchett to us. And Terry Pratchett is coming again. The second one. Romy was amazing. Romy was the show. Honestly. That, frankly, Romy made every first officer in Star Trek looked like an amateur. And she was the ship's AI avatar, but, you know, she was also the de facto first officer in my, looking at that crew. Angasona, a Turing test for humour. Well, it's true. You know, if an AI can do sarcasm, we're fine. It's an AI. Also, if it can do sarcasm, then it can probably understand humans. And that's the other big problem. If we develop an AI which can't understand humour or sarcasm, at some point someone is going to say a joke to it, insult it, and that's when we're going to get the Armageddon that leads to the Terminator Wars and eventually the Matrix. Yeah. So basically, if we develop AI without the ability to have a sense of humour and sarcasm, that's when we get Terminator in the Matrix. As long as we keep it having sarcasm and a sense of humour, we'll be okay. The Big Brzezinski, hello. I preferred Farscape. Moyle was such a sweetheart. Moyle was lovely. King Romy was a lot of young men's favourite character for some reason. Mind out of the gutter. King, the fact that there are technically 3 Rommies with slightly different personalities shows Alexa Doig's acting skills. Yes, and also shows Romy's versatility. Sometimes, Dr. Clark, Romy was the captain, Hunt was the XO. She got a new commander every 3 years, remember? Not the other way around, Doctor. Can't understand them on. Mardoc, a true AI will never be developed by a human because a human defines the parameters of it. Possibly. Angasona, centuries later, the AI finally figures out the joke. Ooh, I get that now. Oh, it is funny. Oh dear, I may have overreacted. Darren Freeman, we need the AI to understand both sarcasm and that humans will press the button marked "Do not press" before the point, saying it has had a chance to dry. Yeah, that's good practice. That's good. My mind reaches for the stars. It just has a habit of slipping halfway there and ending up back in the gutter. Well, it's good. It's trying. See Dark Matter for another good AI show. AI show. So, technically, we're in this book. Desperate Victories by G.H.Bennett. Military Despatches from Dunkirk to the Battle of Britain. Now, what I would point out is I am massively, overwhelmingly, supremely biased in this scenario. Why? Harry Bennett was one of my examiners for my PhD thesis, and he is one of the nicest, most lovely historians you will ever meet. He's also one of the most friendly and funniest, so he's always worth chatting to. He is on Twitter. He responds to questions on Twitter. I am doing my best to try and get him to come on Bilge Pumps at some point. Mainly because, well, the thing was, Andrew Lambert and Michael Clapp were Andrew Lambert and Michael Clapp. They were, to an extent, famous enough that Jamie wasn't going to try and rush them. But the thing is, Harry's not quite as famous as Andrew. In my view, they should be equally famous, but he's not. So it depends. Where Jamie might be tempted to try and actually keep him to time. I think he'll fail, and I think with me and Drac there is no chance of us finishing in a single part episode. But it could be fun. Aldrishan, General Daenerys Targaryen would have brought proper air support to Market Garden. Yes, she would have. Gordon Collins, have you read the Hello books? The human AIs are quite entertaining. Yep, they are cool. Juno 1 Island. We're talking Star Trek. Yeah, a bit. So this is actually the Despatches, okay, and it's produced in concert with the National Archives. So it's all primary source material. So this isn't Harry's words we're reading. These are dispatches from the actual soldiers and personnel who were there. Description of the Dunkirk perimeter. 48. The British sector of the Dunkirk perimeter had it right at Bruges, and thence followed the canals to Fumes and Newport. These places were old-fashioned, fortified towns, easy to defend, but affording good bombing targets. Destruction of the bridges presented no difficulty, and all were in fact blown in time by the British or French troops, except that at Newport, which was wide and solid, and could not be demolished before the arrival of the enemy. Two natural switch lines were available, the canal from Bruges to Dunkirk, and the canal to Des Moines from Dunkirk southeast towards Hunsrück. Immediately north of this line came the inundations, extending from Bruges over the district of the Moros to a wide width varying from 1 to 3 miles. Except in a few places, they did not cover the roads, but were designed to leave them clear, while preventing deployment. They did, however, sometimes prevent troops from digging themselves in. On the Belgian side of the frontier, the order to begin inundations was not given by Belgian GQG till the morning of 26th May, and they never became effective. To the north of the inundations was more low-lying land. Then came the Bruges-Fruins Canal, and then the main lateral road from Fumes to Dunkirk. Finally, there was the narrow strip of dunes, giving way to a wide, open beach, running the whole length of the position, and shelving very slowly to the sea. There were no quays or piers, whatever except those at Dunkirk itself. At intervals of about a mile along the shore lay the seaside resorts of Cruxy, Le Pan, Breduns, and Malo-les-Bassins. They had a sector and problem of traffic control. Sir Ronald Adam, on leaving Cassel, went at once to the headquarters of the 48th Division at Bruges to find out the latest situation, and in particular what troops were immediately available, either to hold the perimeter or to control the traffic. He learnt that the enemy were advancing north-eastwards from the forest of Clemeres. There could therefore be no question of using any of the reserves of the 48th Division, and the only troops immediately available were certain engineering units. General Thorne, however, lent his CRA, Brigadier Honourable Hon E.F. Lawson, was instructed to lay out the defence of the perimeter and to use for the purposes such troops as were on the spot or were entering the perimeter. The position was then divided into 3 core areas, each including a collecting area outside the perimeter, a sector of the canal line, and a sector of the beach. Already it was seen that the traffic problem was going to assume formidable proportions. Ever since the 10th of May, it had been a potential source of trouble, but it had been kept in hand in the early stages by strict adherence to pre-arranged plans and by the use of infantry for traffic control. Once the withdrawal from the Dal began, the problem became acute in France as well as in Belgium. Refugees began to leave their homes in northern France before the French government put into operation the plans they had made. French organisations were not available, and no British troops could be spared to control the traffic. The refugee problem, therefore, became increasingly acute, and the tide which at first set westwards from Belgium had now met the enemy again in the Somme area and begun to turn back on itself. Scenes of misery were everywhere, and the distress of women, children, and aged people was pitiable. Fortunately, the fine weather and warm nights mitigated their plight to some degree, and though the outbreak of famine was expected at any moment, it did not actually occur in the area of the BAF. Little, unfortunately, could be done to help the refugees, since supplies for the troops was still seriously short. Moreover, their presence on the roads was often a grave menace to our movement. It had been necessary to give the Corps a free hand in handling them. On occasions, it had been necessary to turn vehicles into the fields in order to keep the roads clear. During the 27th of May, troops and their transport began to withdraw into the perimeter on the fronts of all three corps. And where the troops had received the necessary orders, vehicles were disabled and abandoned in the assembly areas. The few troops who could be spared for traffic control did not, however, prove sufficient for the purpose, and consequently a greater number of British and French vehicles entered the perimeter and the town of Dunkirk, when they should have remained outside. There was inevitably a large number of vehicles which had become detached from their units, and a number of cases also occurred that day in which units became separated from their formations and arrived within the perimeter without sufficiently clear orders. These were sent to reinforce the defence of the perimeter, or embarked, as seemed best to those in control. It's a very good book. If you can get it, you will like it. Also, if you look at this picture very carefully, you can work out which class of battleship it's a picture of. Jeff Beeler. France 1940 was always makes me think that Montgomery should have been given command of the 1st Armored Division. Would have been an interesting scenario. There's now an interesting debate going on in chat about dragons versus the German Navy in World War II. And I would just like to add that if dragons existed in World War II, A, they would be fighting on the side of the British because it's Britain. We would always make sure we got the dragons. And 2, and this is the most important thing, whether or not they could carry and launch torpedoes. Now, my point to that would be this. You're forgetting something. If dragons exist, then someone will have been working on how exactly to harden ships to survive dragon fire. And just think of the effects that would have on ship design. Felix B. Well, more on the side of the Bosch. Yeah. Paul from Chicago, you would have colonized the dragons. You can bet that one. Antonia, dragons might have been holding a grudge over the whole St. George incident. How do you think we brought them to heel and got them to serve us? It was all down to St. George. Alistair Crow, use the dragon in the engine room, unlimited range. Potentially, yes. Brig Brzezinski, any recommendations for a contrast comparison between Patton and Bradley? Not really at the moment. There are some good ones that might be coming out next year, but I haven't yet got them. Ah. That debate over what dragons would be used for. The current debate is whether or not they'd be used for for firepower or for engine fire, and also whether you're replacing coal with gold and virgins to power them, or use junior officers for their feeding. And this could be an interesting debate. These Bru Ships ones do get to some interesting places. I have to say, I am always surprised by two things. One, the sheer number of super chats I get, because that's always very, very generous of you all. And two, that's the great depth of conversation we get going on. It's always rather interesting. 1:48:00. Paul from Chicago. Dragons would be used for spotting. Yes. Well, you'd probably had aerial warfare come on a lot earlier. In that sort of scenario, you think about it, it's where combat would have started up quite a lot earlier. So fighters would have been reactions to dragons. Shomak, how did we get on this? I'm now looking up meme nicknames for Bomber Harris. Joe Scott, would Dragonfire work well for a close-in weapon system? Burning hot enough and quick enough, I'm not sure what would get it. If it goes to have the sufficient range, I'm not sure how much would get through. Barton and Nelson were behind a tree on the northeast corner of the big intersection, directly west of the crash. The little Fiat was parked against a tree. It looked like the driver had left it with the gas cap wedged tightly against the tree, to prevent Mogadishu's alert and enterprising thieves from siphoning the gas. Nelson had his M60 machine gun propped on the roof of the car with belts of ammo draped over the side. From the two dead Somalis on the street alongside the car, blood formed red-brown pools in the sand. It can't get much worse than this, Barton said. Just then an RPG exploded against the opposite wall with a brilliant flash and a chest-wrenching blast. This made them laugh. Laughter was a balm. It held panic at bay, and it seemed to come easily. In these extreme circumstances, it became unbearably funny just to act normal. If they could still laugh, they were all right. This was definitely more fire than they'd ever had expected to experience in Mogadishu. Nobody had anticipated a serious fight from these characters. Nelson wondered where his friends Cassie Joyce and Dom Filler and Kevin Snodgrass were, and how they were faring. It was raining RPGs. They would drop down from the north and hit the side of the stone buildings and splash along the walls, create great stinking explosions, like someone throwing fireballs. "Goddamn Twombly, this is unreal," Nelson said. He crouched behind a 2-foot concrete ramp between the tree and the wall, and was fiddling with his M60 when a Somali ducked out from behind a tin shed about 10 feet of the street and fired at him and Twombly. Nelson knew he was dead. Rounds hit between his legs, and he felt them passing next to his face. Twombly dropped the man. Nelson saw Twombly mouth words. "You okay?" "I don't know." Twombly had fired his saw about 2 feet in front of Nelson's face, so close that his cheeks and nose had been singed by the muzzle blast. The blast had hammered his eardrums, blinded him, and his head was still ringing. "That hurt," Nelson complained. "I can't hear and I can't see. Don't you ever effing shoot your weapon off that close to me again." Just then another Somali took a shot at them, and Tommy returned fire, his rifle directly over Nelson's head. After that, Nelson wouldn't hear a thing for many hours. Sergeant Paul Howe and the 3 men of his Delta team had still been back on a target house roof when they saw the Caesar team roping down from a Black Hawk about a quarter of a mile northeast. They watched while the Black Hawk took the RPG hit with the men still on its ropes and were amazed at how the pilot held the bird steady after being hit until the last men were down. Howe knew something was going on over there, but since he had no radio link to the command net and he had been too busy inside a target house noticed that a Black Hawk had been shot down, he didn't know why the Caesar team was roping in. He got the full story when he was summoned downstairs by the Delta ground commander, Captain Scott Miller. "We're going to move over there and secure it," Miller said. He explained that the ground convoy, which was loading the Somali prisoners out front, would drive over to the crash site. The rest of them were going to move there on foot. Ranger Chalk 1, led by Captain Steele, would take the lead. The operators would follow, and Ranger Chalk 3, on the south end of the target, led by Sergeant Sean Watson, would bring up the rear. Howe knew the fight was bad and worsening out on the streets. The idea of moving on foot over to where he'd seen the Caesar bird rope its crew in was daunting. He thought, this is going to be fun. Black Hawk Down by Mark Bowden. It's a good book. Dunrick Ironheart. Don't forget, D&D has dragons that can swim, breathe water, dragon subs. Ooh. Dan Freeman, Pfizer's response to Dragon. I'm seeing less doped Lennon as a major construction material than they're making them. Yep. Jerison, time travel. What the hell am I hearing? Time traveling Nelson fighting in Somalia? Yeah. It's next book. Black Hawk Down. Danny Freeman, Seaman versus U-boat. No contest until post-World War II with the ability to engage other submerged targets. Even post-World War II, it's going to be interesting. John F. Beeler, many of the Black Hawk Down troops had hearing problems after the battle. If you're firing that close to each other, you get it. Dirt Squad, yeah, and yet for some reason the Garan ping myth is still a thing. Like anyone could hear it over the noise of the battlefield. Speaking of 5e D&D, there is a Kickstarter going on for a Stargate tabletop RPG based on the 5e rule set. You see, I like Stargate as much as anyone. In fact, probably it's one of my... I'm quite weird, I do admit this, in that my top 3 sci-fi programs do not include Star Trek or Star Wars. And probably the top... Star Trek enters in the top 5, and as does Farscape. Farscape is number 4. Andromeda is number 2. Stargate Atlantis is possibly number 1. Stargate SG-1 is number 3. Number 5 is Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Then going down from that one is Stargate SG-1. Probably the Orville. Then Stargate. It's probably Stargate Universe at that point. If I'm going to watch them. Yeah. Most of the Star Treks, I love them, but I can almost... With some of their storylines, you can put the storyline and chop and change any ship round, and you have the same storyline. Doesn't matter if it's Voyager or Enterprise or what, it's going to be the same result. And Babylon 5, I haven't watched enough of. Jamie is a massive fan of it. And it's the same with Battlestar, and sort of the Battlestar Galactica series. It's sort of a case of I prefer the game to the actual, and the books to the actual programs most of the time. Calvin Gasman, read Blackburn 2, down and hearing problems. Yeah, when in a movie they fire guns indoors and then they hear anything, it's fantasy. Yep, you can say that again. Aviator Enterprise. For me right now, the best sci-fi is The Expanse. Fantastic and remain eventually extremely faithful to the books. Haven't yet watched it. It's like I haven't watched The Greyhound yet. And I haven't watched what's it I wanted to watch but haven't managed to watch yet? Good sign, forgotten it completely. No. I haven't managed to watch The Expanse yet. I haven't watched Greyhound. And there's another one as well I keep meaning to watch, but I haven't managed to watch it yet. Can't remember it. Antonia, The Expanse, where science is hard for humans, but hardly a problem for the aliens. Probably will do. So, let's get into, because so far we've been quite a land forces centric book so far. On talking, have you seen Drax Bombardment of Ancona video? Not yet. I've seen bits of it, but not yet all of it. So, aboard the Farragut class destroyers World War II, a history with first-person accounts of enlisted men by Leo Brock. And I have to admit, this book was sent to me to be reviewed by Marine du Nord, which is a lovely, lovely, lovely journal. So, Edward L. Gilbert, Seaman First Class, USS Dewey, DD 349. After completing basic training in San Diego, I was stationed aboard the destroyer USS Dewey on December 7th, 1941. We were in the harbour at Pearl on our normal schedule. As Seaman First Class, I had the 800 watch. I just returned from early breakfast and was walking back to clean up in preparation for my watch. Suddenly I heard explosions and spotted planes off the stern. Immediately knew they were enemy planes, so I could see the rising sun insignia and the pilot. Torpedoes were already heading for the battleships. As general quarters sounded, I took my position at gun 2. We had to remove the canvas awning and wait for live ammunition to come up from the magazine before we could commence firing. Because of the work being done on our gyro compass, we are unable to get underway until approximately 1200 hours. We then went out of the harbour to patrol, returning after dark to reload ammunition. A very scary time for a 20-year-old sailor. John Mooney, Seaman First Class, USS MacDonough, DD 351. After a leisurely breakfast of scrambled eggs, sausage, and the ever-present canned figs. That must have been a good turnout. My plans for the... Well, I suppose maybe the scrambled eggs counteracted the figs, but, you know, either way. Oof. My plans for the day included a shopping trip to Honolulu. Christmas wasn't too far off, and thoughts of home and family were uppermost in my mind. Transportation to Honolulu was not a problem. As a matter of fact, the taxi fare for the 7-mile trek was a minuscule 2 bits, or 25 cents. The pay of a Seaman First Class was $54, and as a first-class gun captain, I earned an additional $5 per month. The first Liberty boat destined for the fleet landing at Pier 19 was scheduled to show off at 08:15. After breakfast, I double-timed back for a quick shave, shower, and to change into my newly purchased non-regulation bell-bottom whites. As usual, there was no hot water in the washroom, but this sailor was determined to go ashore in the first Liberty party, irrespective of current circumstances. However, the best-laid plans of mice and men often go astray. To be sure, Hirohito's navy had arbitrarily made other plans for my shipmate to me. During my cold water shave and shower, the word was passed to man your fire and rescue stations. Not being that in the duty section, I continued shaving. Within seconds, I heard the familiar tat-tat-rat-tat-tat of machine gun fire. About the same time, the general alarm sounded, and simultaneously the gangway watch, Chief's gunner's mate, Loveland, and his messengers were shouting, "Man your battle stations! Man your battle stations! This is no drill!" I stepped out in the main deck and saw that we were being strafed by aircraft that had rising sun painted on each wing. Needless to say, I was scared to death, but anxious for the opportunity to fire back. Even though my knees were trembling like a couple of jackhammers and my 20-year-old ticker was percolating at flank speed, I managed to scamper up the ladder to my battle station located on the afterdeck house. My son was a gun captain of gun number 4, which was a 5-inch 38 caliber AA gun. Most of the crew arrived on station about the same time. Our supply of adrenaline had peaked. In a matter of seconds, we were manned and ready to repel enemy aircraft. Unfortunately, however, most of our ship's vital equipment, such as compressors, generators, etc., were being serviced and or repaired on our destroyer tender, the Dobbin. Consequently, we had no power to the gun, which necessitated loading the 56-pound projectile and 14-pound power charge by hand and firing in local control. This was almost as primitive as firing with a Civil War musket. But the many laborious hours spent on the loading machine during the previous year really paid off. The crew of number 4 fired 55 rounds at enemy dive bombers and torpedo planes. Unofficially, our crew took credit for downing one torpedo plane. Regrettably, it had already torpedoed its payload and dropped its payload on Battleship Row. During the unprecedented sneak attack, only one member, the gun pointer of our crew, was struck by a piece of shrapnel. It wasn't serious. He remained at his battle station. The rest of the survivors of Gun 4 lived on to fight another day. During the afternoon of the 7th, we finally got underway with our sister ship, the USS Hull, DD 350. We steamed seaward at about 3 or 4 knots and witnessed for the first time the death, destruction, and damage inflicted upon our fleet. Devastation is still beyond comprehension. As we passed by the Holocaust, the crew of the gun number 4 remained stone-faced and silent for many hours. It was all too gross for our young minds to assimilate. This is a really, really cool book. It's really, really cool. Let's see. Jennifer, sorry to say, I don't watch today's. I find shows. I find sci-fi shows. I loved Quatermass and grew up with the legendary shows in the 60s. Much more fun. I have to agree, some of them were better. As the Carol, the subspace submarine and the aircraft carrier sinking were just awesome. Big Brzezinski, Star Wars has been driving me nuts since Squadrons came out. I actually liked the setting and the themes, even the attempt at explaining how the wars all started in Episode 1. But the hardware, that's just props to me. Yeah. King's Rook, Dana Freeman, Carver Gosper. I am reminded of the scene in Good Morning Vietnam where Robin Williams' character is imitating the artillery officer. Play anything so long as it's loud, man. Yeah, you might as well. Do you know 191? That's o'clock. Isn't steak and eggs for breakfast called the meal of the condemned? I'm not sure, but I think add in canned figs, and I'm worried about your stomach. Take care, old Richard. So, Sims, steak and eggs? Now I'm hungry. Don't forget the canned figs. It was steak, eggs, and canned figs. I have no understanding of it. I have none at all. Right, so. Mavericks. Next one. The Maverick Genius of Great Military Leaders by Robert Harvey. Okay, let's consider which officers he's got in here before we get into this too much. Clive of India. Not sure I'd call him a maverick military leader, more a businessman. Wolf of Quebec, the first amphibian and commando. No. Washington, the first American. Excuse me. Definitely wouldn't call Washington a maverick. Nelson, sailor superstar. I'm not sure I'd call Nelson a maverick either. Cochrane, whoa, he's a maverick. The Seawolf, the naval marauder. Wellington, the Iron Duke, master of the Sudden Strike. Not a maverick. No. Garibaldi, the guerrilla, ununifier of Italy. Yeah. Grant, American hammer. Grant, a maverick. I suppose in that he actually wanted to take out his enemy rather than dance around him and win with brilliant poise, possibly. But, no, not a maverick. Rommel, the Desert Fox. Again, what? Patton, the Bulldozer. Monty, the Desert Rat. MacArthur, the last American hero. These aren't mavericks. They're not. It's actually a very good book because he does very good history of the stuff. So it's a case of a book I would recommend, but don't believe the title. They're not mavericks. Again, if you're thinking you're all interested. Most people watching this are probably already interested in military history. Hell, already have military history. This is a great list of people to look at. It's a very interesting list of officers to look at, and he does a lot of great detail. I'll give you one of the bits on Wellington. Wellesley learned of the French concentration of forces in the nick of time and escaped to the southwest across the Tagus using the only available bridge, the Punta del Aresurbo. General Cuesta followed reluctantly, and his rearguard was badly mauled by the French, who captured most of the Spanish guns. Meanwhile, Venegas' army was also badly beaten at Almond de Tolindo. Wellesley's force huddled in the barren hills south of the Tagus, quarrelling with Cuesta's troops, and they were in danger of starving as the Spaniards took what little was available from the peasantry. After a few weeks, Wellesley, disgusted with the Spaniards, whom he blamed for failing to fight effectively at Talavera, decided to bolt back into the fertile land of southern Portugal. He had overreached himself in classical fashion and been forced back to his heartland. The Spaniards were furious with what they saw as British abandonment. They staged a new quixotic attack, but this was crushed at Ocana in November 1809 by 50,000 men against 34,000. The Spaniards fought bravely, but lost 18,000 men and were routed. The governing junta were driven south by a French attack in January 1810 and fled to the safety of Cadiz, where it was overthrown by its fellow countrymen. The French were stopped outside the city as Spanish troops under Sir Thomas Graham held the isthmus into the great port. Some 70,000 French troops found themselves tied down in the south, besieging Cadiz. Wellesley led his men back to the temperate valleys of Beira and Mondego in southern Portugal. There they recovered, engaging in fishing, shooting, and horse racing. By that time, Wellesley had been awarded a peerage as Viscount Wellington, after a town called Willezu in Somerset. The new lord realised that he could make his position in Portugal virtually impregnable, and at the end of October 1809 he ordered his chief engineer, Colonel Fletcher, to start building lines of defences, the lines of Torres Vedras, to safeguard Lisbon. Wellington had to fight calls from England for the withdrawal of his army. He was accused of causing his men needless suffering after Talavera, which was partly true. The new Secretary for War, though, was Lord Liverpool, a pleasant, deeply unimaginative mediocrity, who was a staunch admirer of Wellington. The latter defended himself with uncharacteristic modesty and persuaded Liverpool of the need for a continuing presence in the peninsula. He handed Wellington a free hand in Portugal. I wouldn't describe Liverpool quite as that, but it is a good book. It's just very inappropriate title. Dan Freeman, does this author know what the words military and or maverick means? I don't think so. Cochrane is about the only one in that I'd actually agree is a maverick. Carl Gasman. Fun facts. Fried pork fillet with sunny side up eggs are named Holstein fillet. Cool. Deb Squad. MacArthur, an American hero. He was one getting sacked away from attempting a military coup. Probably. Do you know what okay, lol, that's the first time I've seen you smash a book in face. I would like to reach the author and go, give it a new title. Neil Waddle, Dr. Clark, agree with your assessment of the book. Bangs head. That's the thing. It's actually a well-researched book. It's just... This could be titled Successful Military Leaders, or Thoughtful Military Leaders in some respects. But Clive of India is not a maverick. He's a businessman. He purchases his victories. Very successful. He's a bit of an amoral businessman, but he's a businessman of his time. Frankly, I wouldn't like him, but he's what he is. Wolfe of Quebec is in no way a maverick. General Wolfe is as far away from a maverick as you can get. Washington, the first American. Washington, a maverick? What for? Retreating across some water? He's a very good military commander. He's certainly better than some of the others out there. But I wouldn't call him a maverick for that. Nelson? Not a no. It's just no. Jerison. William Gott was a maverick. He was like, what if I drive around these forts and then he managed to capture a force 5 times size? Well, you might as well. King's Rook. So Arthur Currie has a better claim of being a maverick than a lot of these generals. Yep. Then George Washington appears to have been miffed at not being offered a King's Commission in the 7 Years' War, with some good some rights to do, actually doing so. Jeff Beeler, publishers, aka marketing, pick the title, not offers. You see, I work. That is definitely one of the myths which goes around. But as if me, as a first-time publisher of my book, first-time author, manages to get my title put together quite happily. This book is Robert Harvey's 4th book. Okay? He's had a very successful one. Author of The War of the Wars. He is a very good military historian. I'm sorry, he does take for that title. Tim Sims. Mark Sturdy, would you consider him a maverick? No. Sturdy's not a maverick. Juno 191. Good military historian, bad with book titles. I will agree with that one. Now, you want someone who is a maverick from World War II. I've got someone who's a maverick from World War II. Yeah, I've had author friends get stuck with titles not their own. Yeah, but it's rarer with historians. We often get more say in our titles because we're talking about something which is factual, so they can't play around with that much. No, Waddle, the most moral thing in a war a leader can do is bring the maximum violence against the enemy to end the war as quickly as possible. For the Harris conversation. To an extent, that's part of it, but I would add a codicil to that. The most... I would say the maximum necessary violence in the appropriate places. And sometimes what you're doing, you have to be sure what you're attacking is an appropriate target to achieve the aims you want to achieve. For example, I would say the Blitz, the German focus on British cities rather than the RAF. But the switching from the RAF to try and take out the RAF, trying to take out the bases, trying to take out the radar stations was very, very silly. It was clear now at the beginning of June that on the Kohima front the enemy was breaking and pulling out as best he could. While he still fought stubbornly as an individual, the cohesion of his units and direction of his forces was obviously failing. The time had come to press on and destroy what was left of the 31st Japanese Division. Supreme Commander, on the 8th of June, issued a directive that the Kohima-Impal Road was to be opened not later than mid-July, and I was grateful to him for not being stampeded by more nervous people into setting too early a date. I intended that the road should be opened well before mid-July, but I was now more interested in destroying Japanese divisions than in relieving Impal. So was Stopford. His plan was for 2nd Division, with the bulk of the Corps' artillery and tank support as its main striking force, to push down the Impal Road. The 7th Indian Division was to advance southeast in pace with 2nd Division through the country to the left of the road, thereby protecting the flank of the British Division and cutting off an enemy attempting to disengage the east. Simultaneously, 23rd LRP Brigade was called on for further exertions in an advance on Ukral. This would exploit the special qualities of each formation. The hitting power of the 2nd Division group, the ability of the 7th Division to operate on pack transport away from roads, with little artillery support and on lighter supply scale, and the extreme mobility of 23rd Brigade on air supply. It was hoped that the 2nd Division would force the enemy off the roads to their destruction at the hands of the 7th Division and 23rd Brigade. In any other type of country, this should have been easy. 33 Corps now had the superiority in numbers, artillery, and armour, and absolute domination in the air. But here, the jungles, the hills, the single road, and overall, the monsoon clouds and pelting rain made the development of our strength slow and its employment difficulty. Small rear guards were able to delay our advances while larger parties slipped away, but only in great disorganisation and at the expense of abandoning much of their equipment. On the 6th and 7th June, the 2nd Division, after mopping up in the Aradu area, pushed on towards the 55th milestone on the Impal Road. There was some sharp fighting with the Japanese rearguards before this was reached, and it is typical of the difficulties encountered that on the latter day, the Royal Engineers with the leading troops had to clear 3 landslides and 5 roadblocks, pick up numerous mines, and replace 2 sizable bridges. Luckily, in most instances, the enemy, while he blew up the spans, neglected to destroy the abutments, and our engineers, who had shown the forethought to provide themselves with the original blueprints of all bridges, were able to calculate and carry well forward what was required for replacement of the spans. The first serious opposition was met at Visuea, at about milestone 60. Here the enemy held a strong rearguard position on a great ridge across the road, covered by minefields, artillery, and interlocking machine guns. Our leading troops were held up, and during the evening of the 8th of June forced to fall back a little. Next day a strong flank attack was directed against the ridge, but in the thick jungle, mist and rain mistook one hill feature for another and missed its objective. The area so close and broken was the country, and so stiff the enemy resistance was not discovered until the 11th of June. The attack was then reorientated and went in finally on the 14th. It was successful, and many enemy were killed as they attempted to withdraw. About 4 miles were gained along the road, but then delay was again caused by a blown bridge. This and another enemy rearguard slowed the advance, and only a few miles were covered, so that by the evening of the 16th the leading troops were halted about a mile short of Mao Sesong. Mao Sesong was on the west of was the crest of the watershed between Hiyam and Impal. It offered another, the highest of the ridges, running roughly at right angles across the road. All our information was to the effect that the Japanese intended to hold this very strong position in a final attempt to bar the advance of 33 Corps on Impal. Visuema had been a covering position to be held for some days while Mao Sesong was prepared. During the 17th of June, many enemy positions located on Mao Sesong Ridge were heavily bombarded by night, while encircling the movements around both the east and west flanks were launched. To everyone's surprise, the enemy abandoned his positions and slipped away. This was, I think, the first time in the Burma campaign that such a position had been surrendered without a fight, a most significant change in Japanese mentality. W. Slim. Defeat into Victory by Sir William Slim, Field Marshal. One of my, again, quite a forgotten general, but a really, really good one from World War II. A really good one. Damn, Ron was a maverick. He was viewed as largely uncontrollable and didn't understand anything about logistics but won, some of the time, because good generals knew not to do what he chanced. Possibly. Martinot, gross, your cities have been getting smashed by the enemy, so what do? Continue bombing canals, or give them a taste of their own medicine? You bomb them back to the Stone Age. Philip Otto Scrency, Maverick? I'm not sure. I would say there's a difference between being a good military leader who uses takes advantage of the circumstance and actually learns to do things, and there's being a maverick. And I would say there's a difference between being someone who's a lucky but annoying person and being a maverick as well. I would say Rummel is in the first category. A maverick is someone who looks at a situation, thinks about it crooked, and then works things out to do it in a way which other people would normally not look at. Slim is a maverick because at no point in his command does he think of... He doesn't think of troops as weaker. He thinks of them as having strengths. And as I was... The reason I read that passage out is because he's very carefully going, right, and the British division are going here because of their strength. The Indian Division are going here because of their strength. This brigade is going here because of its strength. And I'm coordinating them. I'm not focusing on, this is the new attack formation. This is the armour division. They must go first. No, he's looking at the train and going, right, if I play around, these things can fit. A Maverick is how they work. If they are prepared to, I consider a Maverick, when I'm talking about it, someone who's prepared to take a risk, but also prepared to write the rulebook as they go, but will keep to that rulebook. So, that's why I put Slim as a Maverick. JMF, I would suggest that Bill Slim was probably the best general officer, British general officer of World War II. I would agree. This is going to sound controversial, but I think if Slim had been in charge rather than Montgomery in the campaign in Europe, I wouldn't be surprised if things would have worked out differently, because in the sense of certain attacks, probably would have done similar plans and similar operations, but Montgomery was slightly less good at judging his own formations in terms of their strengths and weaknesses. For example, earlier we were talking about Lancers versus the Guards division to be the force at Operation Market Garden. I have no doubt that knowing Slim, he would have done that. I also have no doubt that knowing Slim, he would have done it so that there was sort of a two-avenue attack. He wouldn't understand this sort of idea of having a single avenue attack, because we're talking about the Impal Road. If ever there is a place where you think there's going to be a single avenue attack, it's the Impal Road, which is just this long road. Straight down, it's one road. And he's immediately going, well, no, I can put this division, because they can do light order movements easily, go through the jungle. This division can go down the road because they've got the armour and the firepower to brush them. And the whole idea is they drive them off, and he's not positioning it for the British division to win the battle. He's going, right, so the Japanese will withdraw because of the British division with heavy armour, and then they'll get wiped out by the Indian division because they're my kick-ass jungle unit. That is Slim. You know, how many generals are going to think like that? That's what he's thinking, and as I said, this is why I put him as, I agree, he's one of the best. Martin Dock. Trouble with Bill Slim was he was an Indian Army officer who was looked down on by the British Army. Same thing happened with Auckland in the desert. Yeah. But he was good. Do you know what I know? Any good books on the sinking of Repulse and Prince of Wales? I think Ian Ballantyne's doing one at the moment, but I'm not sure if it's out yet. It's still about the Prince of Wales. There is a good free academic paper, though, as Daniel Freeman has just pointed out. So, Grosowski. Now I'm wondering to what extent Monty's tactics in Europe were influenced by what worked for him in the desert, ignoring different trains, roads. There's always a possibility. I'd say Monty is a very good field marshal. Please don't get me wrong. He's not a bad choice. I'm just saying I think Slim would have been a better choice. But there again, Slim, you can't really replace him. There is no one as good as him at fighting a jungle war. honestly, the only way you could have actually made that situation better would be if you managed to link MacArthur's command with Slim's and put Slim in overall charge of both all those troops. Because I think Slim would have done a better job for the troops than MacArthur. But that's not me being Anglo-centric. I do know some people do sometimes suggest I'm a bit jingoistic on this one. But I do point out when the British officers are not as good as they are. But let's be honest, Slim was a better commander than MacArthur. Give MacArthur a fancy title, quite happily, but put the troops under the command of Slim, and I think you would have had a far better outcome for many of those soldiers involved in MacArthur's campaigns than MacArthur, because MacArthur is very good at the statements about the policy, but he leads so much to the staff, he never really gets to grips with the detail, especially the detailed units. I think Slim would have got to grips with the detailed units, even on that larger scale, and would have been organising them far better. Matthias Slavic, in the video on HMS Edinburgh, you mentioned a colonel from the Czechoslovakian army. Do you know anything else about him? I've been doing some research into that. I'm still not quite sure, but we know he was there aboard HMS Edinburgh, and I do have a book on the sinking of HMS Edinburgh, which I think is in that box over there. I'm sorry, I've got... What's actually quite disturbing to some people, and my family especially, was when they realised this, is that actually out on bookshelves, and I've got Billy back bookshelves all the way along there, and I've got this here, all summer books, and I've got literally about a third to 40% of my books out. The rest are all in boxes, positioned around the room and upstairs, and piles on the floor, and so I haven't got the book out, but it is a good one. You have to admit MacArthur did work. I admit he worked, but frankly, I think he could have been... that Slim would have been an improvement. Paul from Chicago. Everyone was a better commander than MacArthur. Schumack. Paul from Chicago. Grumbles in nuance. Don't worry, Derp Squad. Dyslexia affects us all. I understood what you meant. Do you know one item? Would any of the Admirals in the Pacific be considered Maverick? If so, why? No. There's none I would put them. Dunraganhammer. Would it have been a Slim improvement? I'll see myself out. Oh, that's also the other thing that Slim never did. As Neil would have put, MacArthur threw people under the bus multiple times. Slim never threw anyone under the bus. It wasn't in his nature. It was, this is my team. If you don't like what's happened, then fire me. They're doing what I'm telling them to do. I give them the objectives. And the whole time, it basically forces, at several points, he forces Churchill and other people to, when they don't like what his divisional command's been, because they've been held up because an attack's taken longer than it was supposed to on their metrics, or this, that, the other, and they go, you need to fire this general, and Slim goes, no, you can fire me, but you're not firing him. And they basically go, we can't fire Slim. It might have been possible to cut the air in the uncommon room with a knife, had anyone been able to find a knife, or hold a knife the right way it found. From the point of view of the wizards, it was business as usual, but while a number of captains were being wheeled away in a wheelbarrow, thoughtfully stationed there early in the evening, there were enough visitors still standing to make for a damp but hot hubbub. In an unregarded corner, the patrician and the two arch-chancellors had found a space where they could relax unheeded in the big chairs and settle a few matters. "You know, Henry," said Veterani to the former dean, "I think it would be a very good idea if you were to referee the match." "Oh, come on! I think that would be most unfair," said Ridley. "To whom, pray?" "Well, said Ridley, "there could be a question of rivalry between wizards." "But on the other hand," said Veterani, his voice all smoothness, "it might also be said that for political reasons another wizard would have a vested interest in not allowing a fellow archmage to be seen to be bested by people who, despite their often amazing talents, skills, features, and histories, are nevertheless lumped together in the term ordinary people." Ridley raised a very big branding glass in the general direction of the edge of the universe. "I have every faith in my friend Henry," he said, "even though he's a little bit on the tubby side." "Oh, unfair!" snapped Henry. "A large man may be quite light on his feet. Is there any chance of me having the poisoned dagger?" "In these modern times," said Henry, "I'm sorry to say that a whistle of some sort will have to suffice." At which point someone tried to slap Veterani on the back. It happened with remarkable speed and ended possibly even faster than begun, with Veterani still seated in his chair, with his beer mug in one hand and the man's wrist gripped tightly at head height. He let go and said, "Can I help you, sir?" "You're the Lord Veterani, aren't you? I seed you on them postage stamps." Ridley glanced up. Some of Lord Veterani's clerks were briskly heading towards them, along with some of the slurred speaker's friends, who could be defined at this point as people who were slightly more sober than he was. And right now, we're sobering up very, very fast, because when you have just slapped a tyrant on the back, you need all the friends you can get. Veterani nodded at this gentleman, who evaporated back into the crowd, and then he snapped his fingers at one of the new waiters. "A chair here, please, for my new friend." "Are you sure?" said Ridley, as a chair was pushed under the man, who, by happy coincidence, was falling backwards in any case. "I mean," said the man, "everyone says you're a bit of a whacker, but I says you're white over this football thing. Show future in just slogging away. I should know. I got kicked in the head quite a few times." "Really?" said Lord Veterani. "And what is your name?" "Swivin, sir," said the man. "Any other name by chance, Veterani?" "Dustworthy," he said. He raised a finger in a kind of salute. "Captain, the Cockbill Boars." "Ah, you aren't having a good season," said Veterani. "You need fresh blood in the squad. Especially since Jimmy Wilkins got put into the tanty after eating someone's nose. Nap Hill walked all over you because you lost your backbone when both of the Pinchpenny brothers were taken to the Lady Sybil, and you've been stuck down in the mud for 3 seasons. Okay, everyone says that Harry Capstick is making a very good showing since you bought him from Treacle Mine Tuesday for 2 crates of Winkle's Old Peculiar and a sack of pork scratchings, which is not bad for a man with a wooden leg, but there's never anyone in support." A circle of silence spread outwards from Veterani and the swaying Swithin. Ridley's mouth had dropped open, and Henry's brandy glass remained half empty, an unusual occurrence for a glass that's been in the hands of a wizard for more than 15 seconds. "Also, I'm hearing that your pies are leaving a lot to be desired, such as dead, cooked, organic content," continued Veterani. "Can't get the shove behind you when the pies are seen to be walkabout." "My laddish," said Swithin, "are the best there is. It's not their fault they're up against better people. They never gets a chance to play someone they can beat. They always gives it 120%, and you can't give more than that. Anyhow, how come you know this stuff? It's not like we're big in the league." "Oh, I take an interest," said Veterani. "I believe that football is a lot like life." "There is that, sir. There is that. You does your best, and then someone kicks you in the fork." "Then I strongly advise you to take an interest in our new football," said Veterani, "which will be about speed, skill, and thinking." "Oh, yeah. Right, I can do all them," said Stringeth, at which point he fell off his chair. "Does this poor man have any friends here?" said Veterani, turning to the crowd. There was some diffidence among them concerning whether or not it was a good idea to be friends with Swithin at this point. Veterani raised his voice. "I would just like a couple of people to take him back to his home. I would like them to put him to bed and see that no trouble comes to him. Perhaps they ought to stay with him until morning too, because he just might try to commit suicide when he wakes up." Unseen Academicals. Again, the rule Veterani lives by: there is no such thing as having too much information. G.H.Bennett. Slim got his boss removed and took his job. Good at politics? Yep. And he did it without embarrassing his boss either. Paul Ketchum. If you could have swapped any US or Commonwealth commanders to work in the other theatres, who would you have done, assuming Asian Indian Ocean is British and Pacific and Oceania is America? I would love to swap Nimitz and Cunningham around just to see how well they do in each other's role. Because they are the two most similar admirals I think of in World War II. And especially their approach and their philosophy. And I'd love to see what they do in each other's job. I just would love to do it. Jerison, Bill Slim would throw people under the bus quite often, but in a lot of the cases it was officers who refused or disobeyed his orders without reason. He sacked the officers of an entire battalion once. He didn't throw them under the bus, he sacked them. There is a difference when you sit there and blame and go, I didn't commit this mistake, they did. That's throwing people under the bus, blaming people for your mistakes. Slim, they didn't do it right, so he fired them. He said, the nicest way, I gave the orders, they weren't followed. The nicest way, it's my fault because they weren't followed and I didn't check this unit would do it, so bye-bye to the officers. A plebiscite. More Pratchett. Awesome. Yes, that was the unseen Academicals. Juno 101. Dr. Clark. Found something cool out. Exeter, Ontario in Canada is named after HMS Exeter. And there's a street named after the captain of the Graf Spee. Cool. Neil Woodall. The Puller-MacArthur fight over the sacking of an army divisional commander in the Pacific has made for many discussions with an army friend of mine. Also, MacArthur was very willing to fight till the last Marine. Yep. Very sassy as Neil Woodall, as long as he wasn't there personally, of course. Well, you know, this is MacArthur. That's good. Jefferson, that's not so much throwing someone on the bus as getting rid of an unreliable commander. They'd shown they couldn't be trusted, and thus he got rid of them. That there is a difference between sacking people and throwing them under the bus. Unseen Academicals, not Daniel Freeman. Unseen Academicals, not necessarily the best of Soteries, but still good. The trouble is, my favourites are usually the ones about the Ankh-Morpork, I have to admit. I'm a big fan of the watch. I do like the witches, though. Granny Weatherfax is always fun. So later, I miss a lot. Writing on my greatest source of World War II, I am old, so older generation to me were mostly veterans of World War II. Dad fought for Dougie on Luzon. Danny Freeman, send MacArthur to command in Iceland. New IKB 472. You cannot have too much information, only too little processing power. Yep. Dave, as far as Mavericks in the American Revolution goes, how about General Nathaniel Greene? He won a campaign by constantly running away and losing every battle he did fight. Well, if you're going to win it somehow, you might as well do it in an interesting way. I think that the fantastic Mozrek, who was the chief of the intelligence of the Czechoslovakian government in exile and also was a colonel at the time, could be the one. If you disagree, I'd like to know. I think it could. That does match the name, but I wasn't going to have a go at pronouncing it unless someone else spelt it. I'm sorry, Mrs. Slavic, but my pronunciations of these names are not that great, so I tend to avoid them. But yes, that does look very much like the name I've got. But I'm currently looking up because I don't think he was alone. He's listed as one Czechoslovakian colonel, but I think he had a staff with him, and I'm interested in finding out what they were there for and what they're doing. It's an interesting story what the town class cruisers get up to. There is actually a bit of it about it in the town class book I have somewhere around me. Dan Freeman, it's the responsibility of a good leader, a good commander, to equip themselves with subordinates who cover their weaker areas. Yeah, we always hope. I'm going to read this response. Joe Richardson, Daniel Freeman, the issue is officers who think they know more than a staff sergeant with 22 years of service and can't accept the fact that the troops they command are sometimes more competent. Daniel Freeman's, Joe Richardson, they are morons and need to be replaced. All those who second Daniel and all those who second Joe Richardson say aye. Right, I'll be back in a second. If I can make it across my bed. Oh, that was a close one. Sorry. All right then. Hmm. In June 1941, Cossack, with a division of the 4th Flotilla, was detached to operate from Plymouth. We relieved a force under the command of Captain Mountbatten, which had been sent there to counter the night raids against our coastal convoys, which were being made by German destroyers based in Brittany, and by E-boats, high-speed, small craft armed with gun or torpedo. Under conditions which demanded a highly trained team, since operations were carried out in darkness and at a very high speed, Captain Mountbatten's spell of duty had been successful. He had intercepted and routed a German destroyer raid, and quelled the E-boats. Asking how he dealt the E-boats, whose normal tactics were to lie stopped in the likely track of an approaching convoy, accelerating with the greatest rapidity and attacking at their highest speed when ships were sighted, he replied that he would have coped with them more easily had he had more super weapons. His rate of fire was inadequate against small, fast-moving targets. Determined to do everything possible to maintain with our own division the standard which Captain Mountbatten had set with his, I got in touch with the controller, Admiral, now Lord Fraser. He was the member of the board for the Admiralty responsible for ship construction armament. On our next return from sea, lorries arrived carrying 8 pom-pom guns, which were quickly mounted, one on each side of the signal bridge in every ship. We had the weapons we needed for anti-E-boat operations. The kindly controller, with his magic wand, had in 48 hours made an essential addition to our equipment. In other circumstances, approval could have well taken months or even years. While at Plymouth, I met the Prime Minister for the first time. Mr. Churchill had succeeded Mr. Chamberlain over a year before, but during a dark hour for the nation. I fell at once and forever under his spell. I was never to see the pom-poms in action, because at the end of June, under a scheme introduced by the First Sea Lord, I was promoted Rear Admiral before my time. These early promotions to flank rank were never liked in the Navy, and the scheme fell into abeyance after Sir Dudley Pound's death. At about the same time, when they had coincidentally enough Rear Admirals, at about the same time there occurred the world event which transformed the entire course of war. Hitler attacked Russia, at first inflicting disastrous losses. The Prime Minister at once determined that all that could be done must be done to help the then groggy bear towards its second wind. We should, he said, grasp its right paw in the Black Sea and its left in the White. Action followed quickly. On the evening of the 12th of July, I received a message to pack what was necessary for a week's travel, and to report immediately to First Sea Lord in London. On going ashore, I had no notion that I should never see Cossack again, nor be given an opportunity to take leave of our officers and men, and those of the rest of the 4th Flotilla. On reaching Studley Pound's room in the early hours the next morning, I found him closeted with the general, afterwards Marshal Golikov, who was to become the hero of Kiev. He had with him an ill-favoured Russian colonel, and an interpreter. I had not seen the First Sea Lord since he had laid down command in the Mediterranean in 1939. The strain of conducting a naval war in which, owing mainly to the preponderance of the enemy's shore-based aircraft and to the ruthless conduct of the submarine campaign, the advantage seems as yet to lie with the Germans, appeared to have left little mark upon him. As ever, he seemed to be a stoic, a slow, but profound thinker, immune from ordinary emotion. General Golikov, who at the time was Vice Chief of the Russian General Staff, had been sent to Britain to seek British assistance. He had brought an invitation from Kuznetsov, the Soviet Commissar for the Navy, to send a naval force to the White Sea or to Murmansk, to which port German land forces now lay close. Its purpose would be to interrupt the enemy's seaborne supply route, which lay via the Norwegian Leads and the North Cape to their disembarking points. Fulfilling the Prime Minister's intention, the First Sea Lord was prepared to assemble such a force, which would not necessarily consist of surface ships. Much would depend on facilities available at the proposed bases and the degree of security they enjoyed. This is, of course, Phillip Vian's account, action this day. And Mountbatten occasionally gets a good word, because occasionally... But interesting enough, here's the thing. Mountbatten's facing the problem. He spots the problem. Yes, we have lack of weapons. Vian turns up and goes, so you needed those weapons? Yes. Okay, fine. Rings up the First Sea Lord. Hollers down the phone to Third Sea Lord. Fraser goes, of course I'll send you weapons. Question is here. Why didn't Mountbatten, with all his connections, do the same thing? Why was he complaining about something, but not trying to fix it? Oh. I'm worried about my chat. It's now developed into the Blackburn. Blackburn is a sacred thing, and Mountbatten is a swear word. And there goes hope of your OBE. Was I planning on getting an OBE? Mountbatten should be considered a swear word. Thank you for the Iron Brew, Dub Squad. Mm-hmm. Not now. Well. Dorigano, we really are developing in a cult, aren't we? It's actually, what's quite funny is when it spills over into Drax chats, and suddenly they're all Drax. People are going, what is Blackburn? Blackburn? Where has this come from? Mountbatten's a swear word? When did this happen? Oh. See why it's Mountbatten, tainted by Dieppe. Winston forgave him, probably remembering his Gallipoli memory. Yeah, Mountbatten is responsible for so many things, even worse than Dieppe, but Dieppe was pretty bad on. Right, Cash, a family friend was a second Sea Lord who commanded a famous vessel in the Falklands. The only naval history book he recommended me was Rules of the Game by Andrew Gordon. It's a good enough book. Jermac, I really need to compose Naval History Live Bingo. That would be quite fun. That would be quite fun. I am now really worried about the cult. Didn't just start to see if we could get a reaction. I didn't just start to see if we could get a reaction out of Clark. Eh. Oh, right. Right then. So, we now have the last book of today. Admirals. By Andrew Lambert. And I get to read about talk about my favourite admiral. Geoffrey Hornby's longbooks from his period reveal his consistent attention to detail. Initially, he noted the navigational features and holding ground of every harbour visited, with the sources of food, water, and firewood. The latter observations were soon replaced with notes on the availability and cost of coal and local lighters. The station, essentially the entire west coast of the American continent, was relatively quiet, but two deaths changed Hornby's situation. His eldest brother, Phipps, died suddenly in Canada, making him heir to the family estate. Then a death vacancy secured his promotion to commander on 9th of February 1850, the day before his 25th birthday. The flagship paid off on Portsmouth in June 1851. On his return, Admiral Hornby moved into a house he had inherited at Little Green, only 16 miles from Portsmouth. Hornby did not have long to rest. His cousin, Edward, Lord Stanley, heir to the 14th Earl of Derby, invited him to India. Leaving in London in late July 1851, they travelled across France by rail and coach, then by steamship to Alexandria, by river to Cairo, and across desert by camel wagon to Suez to join a P&O steamer to Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. Here Hornby was taken ill with abscesses of the liver, and he retraced his outward voyage as an invalid. He arrived home, much recovered, shortly before Lord Derby formed the government. Admiral Hornby joined aboard the Admiralty, chiefly in the hope of being able to help his son. Hornby spent the year studying steam engineering at Woolwich. When the government fell, both Admiral Sir Hyde Parker, the senior naval lord, and Phipps Hornby had their sons promoted to captain, effective from the 18th of December 1852. As his father retained office in the new ministry, Captain Parker, another youngster from Winchester's gunnery, received the command. Tragically, he was killed in the Crimean War, attacking Russian batteries in the Danube. Hornby avoided his fate by spending the only major war of the century ashore and unemployed. As the son of a vowed Tory and nephew of the last Prime Minister, he was ignored by the Liberal ministries of Lord Aberdeen and Lord Palmerston. However, he remained the youngest captain in the service, outranking many officers promoted for Crimean service. Though his enforced idleness was frustrating, Hornby was due some time ashore after 3 long commissions. With a useful increase in pay and time in his hands, he married Emily Coles of nearby Ditcham Park on 20th of April 1853. Later, the couple settled at Lordington, a cottage on his father's estate, where 4 children were born. Sir Phipps' good fortune continued when an uncle and cousin died, leaving him further funds to add to the freight money, a percentage paid on previous medals of coins carried home by warships from the Pacific Command, and a 4,000-acre property on the Hampshire-Sussex border. Geoffrey took to the life of a farmer. He ran the estate and began to sign himself Phipps Hornby, in honour of the man who had left the estate to his father. His scientific approach to life extended to advanced agricultural methods, and he took particular pleasure in tree planting, little realising that the days of the wooden warship were over. Professional studies, mathematics and science occupied him indoors, while hunting, shooting and fishing provided outdoor amusement. However, his continued commitment to the Navy was reflected by his decision to spend a year studying at the Royal Naval College, Portsmouth, between August 1857 and June 1858. As heir to an estate, many men would have found a higher duty at home, but Hornby had other ambitions. When Lord Derby formed his second administration, he pressed for a ship and did not have to wait long. On 16th August, he was ordered to join HMS Tribune, a steam frigate on the China Station. The ship had been ordered to carry 150 spare Royal Marines to Vancouver, where a gold rush had caused considerable unrest. With improved communication, he managed the passage to Hong Kong in 45 days. This was a choice command for a young captain. But Hornby did not rest on his laurels. On arrival, he discovered the ship badly needed refit. The first lieutenant, who is very young, had only kept up appearances, nor was the station's discipline to his taste, and Sir Michael Seymour operated a relaxed regime in the sultry heats of South China. Hornby was horrified to find that once the ship was ready for sea after refit, it took 4 hours to bend and furl all the sails, and the captains of tops were ignorant of their duties. There was a complete lack of that man-of-war discipline he considered essential. After a rough and frustrating passage to Nagasaki, Hornby found the ship's company much improved on the second leg, putting in some expressive ocean sailing to reach Eskimo Dunkirk in early February. Here the tail end of the gold rush prompted some desertions, while the ship's rotten mainmast was placed from a local forest. Although the original crisis was over and the Admiral had departed, Hornby's arrival was timely. A dispute blew up with the United States in July over the title to the San Juan Island, which lay between Vancouver and the mainland. American troops occupied the island, but the British government sent the magistrate to demand they leave, and directed Hornby to prevent any reinforcements from landing. Confident the American government would disavow their local commander, the British decided to keep quiet until instructions arrived from Washington. As a senior officer on the station, Hornby found himself as acting admiral, and demonstrated superior understanding of the issues far beyond seamanship and smart sail handling. When the American commander rejected his proposal compromise, Hornby was quick to make this point. I have told him that he and his government must be responsible for whatever happens thereafter, and also that I land directly if I conceive that the honours of interest of England require it. As we are fortunately here in much superior force to him, the American commander, we can afford to be forbearing without danger of our motives being misunderstood. Whilst I hold it would be impolitic to land except some of our people are absolutely interfered with. He's a good one. JP, Clarkson has done some Zir, Arnhem, and PQ-17 so far. Nonakash, I love this book. Dan Freeman, liver abscesses are nasty. There they are. Robert Razorback. Neil, I'm biased but disagree. He felt bad about the drinking and tried to lead the enemy. That's awesome. My Lord Henderson will be haunting you this evening and spinning in his grave at that remark. There are many remarks. King, the M word was a royal. He could only fail upwards as a result. That's going to Dieppe was before Sinclair. There are also suggestions that Mountbatten didn't have authorization to conduct the invasion, hence no support. It was called a raid after the fact. Yeah, you don't usually take armor on a raid. Saint-Nazaire, April 42, Dieppe, August 42. Saint-Nazaire was Saint-Nazaire was March 1942 and Dieppe, August 1942. Canada's first division-sized battle. My favourite admiral. Well, in this book, my favourite admiral. Besides, the trouble is for Henderson is that he does a great lot as Third Sea Lord, but he doesn't get the fleet command. If he'd had the fleet command, he was rear admiral aircraft carriers, but he never got to do a fight. If he'd, as a former Third Sea Lord, gone out and got a station and done well with that, I could call him my favourite admiral, really, with honesty. But he's my favourite Third Sea Lord and my favourite of the Sea Lords in history. He was the rank of admiral, but he didn't get to really do what admirals do get to do in terms of commanding a fleet. Rather annoying considering he built it. Mm-hmm. 0307. Now that's the books for this evening done, and we're now into the Q&A until the Iron Brew runs out, or until my puppy dog makes too much noise. So, knowing my puppy dog as well as I do, and he is a good puppy dog, I'm going to guess he'll start making noise by about past. So we'll say roughly, probably 9:30 we'll finish this. So about another 19 minutes. Okay, so plenty of time for questions. But I am going to look seriously reclined while doing those questions. Hello. Rapid Razorback. If Dieppe was a raid, then Barbarossa was a reconnaissance. Recon in force. Possibly. King's Rook. Canadian military Mavericks in World War II? Most of the Canadian colonels. I'll say this like, how do you think the music conference would have ended if there was Churchill instead of Chamberlain? Churchill in several conferences of allies during World War II showed himself to be a doughty negotiator who didn't give an inch and always was prepared. During most of he secured what he did in World War II by often negotiating from theoretically the weaker position. At Munich, he would have been theoretically in a stronger position. I doubt he would have settled for a piece of paper. He would have wanted troops moving and withdrawing from positions, or he would have threatened to action. He would have been. He'd probably mobilized. Jeff Elam, hypothetical: Henderson versus Italy over Ethiopia. If Henderson had been involved in that one versus Italy over Ethiopia, then I'm not sure whether Italy would have had a navy finished, because the combination would have been Henderson and Cunningham at that point. No, Henderson and Pound. And Pound was a good Mediterranean commander. Jack, in Bingo for now. Blackburn, not bad. Admiral Henderson. HMS Unicorn. That's a really cool book. Dr. Clark, personification of a ship. Iron Bru Ship. Carver Gasberg, and World War I in Adriatic. Well, the Iron Bru Ship is just going to be easy. Dr. Clark mispronouncing a foreign name. Happens a lot. Bilge pumps. That's always cool. Fluffy research assistant. Wait a moment. Disappears to the side. Schumacher. UK wasn't ready for war in 1938, but neither were the Germans, and Churchill would have known that. And Churchill might have banked on the fact that we had a lot more naval force. If you look at the number of submarines, etc., the Germans have available in 1938, Churchill would have gone far more confrontational. Port of Chicago. How much attention does the Admiralty pay to Lloyd's 101? Depends if their arguments are helpful to the case the Admiralty is currently making at that time or not. If they're not helpful, they ignore them. If they're helpful, they listen to them. Other side, both you and Drac regularly recommend Norman Freeman's books. In order to save time in future, are there anything we should stay away from? Not really. I would say his air defence of the fleet, fighters over the fleet one, is a bit repetitive, but that's due to the format more than the writing. Gordon Collins, how's the FRA still awake? Ours starts to crash out after 9 p.m. What can I say? He wasn't tired out by the walk and by the lifting of turf we've already done today, because we were moving turf from the back lawn to the front lawn. Rapid Racer, can you court-martial royal? Depends on the royal. I wouldn't try and court-martial Prince Philip. Run Cash, Admirals, I was amazed by the death rate of crews in the China station. Scary. Yep, lots of diseases going around. And lots of bad infrastructure to support them. Do you know what I mean? Besides Monty seeing the Canadians as cannon fodder, he didn't. Monty didn't see any of his troops as cannon fodder. He really didn't. He wasn't that type of guy at all. He would often cry over the troops he lost, and when he was talking about them as individuals, he was really not at all. Jeff Miller, Canada's biggest maverick in World War II was Frank Worthington, father of our armour corps. Bought old tanks for scrap to get trainers for the army. Sounds small. Dunrakanon, a bit off topic, but would the topic of merchant navies fall into the preview for a video act? Think about Norwegian merchant navy in World War II. I'd be quite happy to do one. Now we'll have to go into the suggestions for December, but you know. The fact Henderson did not have a major wartime command, can you think of an admiral who never set on foot on a ship after his first tour? Not really. Not in World War II. After that, there have been admirals who have, once they become admiral, have never gone to sea really again. They've held operational commands, but they've held them from shore bases. Fraser, would anything work for your reincarnation of a unicorn? I do often consider HMS, consider an LHD. Thanks, Staff Thompson, for sharing that on this Discord. Derp Squad. Actually, no. The colonial you've put here, the colonial troops are often put into more dangerous situations. Less political trouble at home if colonials died than British troops. So they became very good soldiers. That's not really the case because you have to remember there's a lot of consent that has to come from the colonial governments. It's a very touchy political situation. The British have to bend over backwards regularly with the Canadian government, New Zealand government, the Australian government, and the Indian governments in various things to point out that they are taking exactly the same risks with British troops as they are with the colonial troops. There is a lot of different perceptions that go on, but the truth is and some of these perceptions are written well after the war, but during the war they were definitely sent on the same high level of risk operations. The trouble is, it's like things like Operation Epsom and all these things. A lot of the operations which involve British troops are not as famous as some of the ones which involve the colonial troops. Because for the British, they were just another operation. For the colonial troops, they would be the major operation because that was their major force. So it's how they get the perception in term comes from apart from the popular memory, which is informed because of the focus on those units versus the British one, which is more spread out. DG40. Given today's books, what is your opinion on Curry Barrett's The Swordbearers? I'm not really sure how to put it. Corey Barnett, some of his land command comments are very good. Some of his comments about naval command are very limited because in land battles you can, to an extent, force the enemy to fight you. In sea battles, you can't force the enemy to come out and fight you. Hi Trent, we passed Slim. We're now into the general question section, but going on between Oliver Lease and the Slim over the invasion of Malaya, they're typical usual fights in that one person wants to set a schedule which is lovely and which looks great on paper, and one's going, that won't work. And Slim is usually the one going, that won't work. Sean Max screeches in nuance. That's what most of this channel is about. Nuance. Then the Anzacs still get twitchy about Gallipoli and seem to forget more British soldiers died than Anzacs. Look, Gallipoli is a disaster from the get-go in certain of its organisation when it comes to troops getting ashore. It's the amphibious warfare crucible for amphibious warfare in the modern age. It really is. But that also means that there are lots of mistakes there which are learned from. Syndicates, how do you rate Richard Woodman's Mid-Arctic Convoy books? Currently reading Arctic Convoys. They're good. I like his Nathaniel Drinkwater series. They're very good, and I like his books. They're interesting. Felix B. By the way, the colonial cruisers like Australia and New Zealand, did they finance them? They did contribute various amounts. Rapid Razorback, can you give me an example of naval fiction? I've been reading too much Dale Brown. Well, there is Woodman who was mentioned, and I'm looking around for the other guy. I've got around here somewhere, but I cannot see him. Oh yeah, Douglas Freeman or Richard Woodman, both good. Hello, Constant Drowsiness. So Thompson, in regards to making them fight, a bombardment of coastal town major port would demand a response, but no, otherwise you'd be facing the wrath of the voter. Well, that's the thing. You would in the UK, but would you in Kaiser's Germany? No. Going out to fight the entire Royal Navy, bombarding ashore? Besides, in a nice way, if you're bringing the Royal Navy in that close to Germany, there are minefields, there are submarines, there are going to be torpedo attacks, and there's potential air attacks. You really want to do that? You really want to run that risk? The thing is, he's not going to throw away his advantage. That's the exact situation. That's what the Japanese were planning in World War II. That's what the Germans planned. They wanted the British or the Americans to come in so they could whittle them away. Alright, Fluffy Research Assistant is starting to make noise, so I will be going at past. So I'll just say thank you to everyone now. Thank you very much. It's been very nice chatting to you. I'm going to answer the last questions, but I am preparing you down. I'm going to go. So please, as always, remember, I have you can find slides of things on Patreon. Which is very nice because that's my book fund and bookshelf fund at the moment. You can find me on Twitter at AC_Naval History. There is a little subscribe button down below, I think on that side of the screen. And there's next to it a little bell, which if you press, you get notified when I'm giving these presentations, giving these chats. Dan Freeman, Colonial versus Dominion troops. I think there's a degree of difference. The Dominions were... I don't think there's as much difference as there can be. Kingsman, any Canadian generals, admirals you feel are particularly fine examples of Egypt? Not really. Most of World War II, they're sort of combined Royal Navy force. They're not really a separate navy. Quite a lot of them move about. I like Madrick. Madrick's good, but he's not an admiral during World War II. Regarding leadership, was Joseph Stilwell as bad as his reputation suggests? I'm trying to look up to see if there's any redeeming qualities for Joseph Stilwell. He was trying his best in a situation which was very, very difficult. And frankly, he didn't have the best subordinates, but he was caustic as hell. Excuse the French there. What is the next topic and when? I'm off for reading week this week. And then the topics come back next week. But currently live is the patron vote for topics in November. There are going to be 2 long patrols. At least one. One I need to finish the recording of tonight. And several little short videos coming out this week. As I do mostly when I have a reading week, there's going to be some of the videos coming up. You're going to enjoy them, hopefully. Steph Thompson, Dr. Clark, Fluffy Researchers have got our puppy going. Ah well, I thought a minesweeping operation just ahead of fleet might work. It could work, but it's going to require a lot of effort for a lot of risk, and what are you going to gain from it? Yeah, that's the thing. What are you going to gain from it for doing it? Right. I'm afraid it is past, so I'm going to say thank you to everyone. Thank you very much. And I hope you've had a nice evening. I hope you've enjoyed us all. And thank you. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Oh, and as a quick taster of what might be coming this week in terms of Long Patrol. Yeah, there you go. Still getting used to this. Bye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.